underneath long-lost texts and etched into long-forgotten stone. Questions linger in the shadows of long-gone temples, murmuring through the ages. Unsolved enigmas that have defied all attempts at explanation through prayer, prophecy, and theology. A serene chapel housing a lifeless sculpture. An invincible monk making his way through a raging inferno. Hands that never met etched symbols across continents. Are we here to decipher messages or marvel at miracles? Religion has provided solutions for a long time. Also, it has increased. Inconceivable results. There seems to be a correlation between spiritual writings and astronomical phenomena. But why? How come artifacts show up in places where they should not? What actually transpired at the alleged opening of the heavens? We won't be looking for belief tonight. The sacred riddles left behind by pilgrims, prophets, and time itself are what we shall pursue. Here we will explore the realm of religious mysticism, where the boundary between the miraculous and the implausible blurs. So settle in and let ourselves be carried away. Blur. Hiding beneath layers of bulletproof glass and protected by quiet, the Shroud of Turin is a relic that has sparked emotions, thoughts, and discussions for generations in a dimly lit cathedral in Turin, Italy. Almost spectral in appearance, it is more than 14 feet long, linen in color, and very pale. Inscribed within its fibers is a picture of a guy. Various scars of torture may be seen on his body, including scourge wounds over his back, blood from a crown of thorns, and the stain of nails driven through his wrists and feet. Here we have the covering of Turin, a sacred relic that has been the subject of extensive study, heated controversy, and mysterious interpretation. Not the fabric per such, but the form it seems to bear, the front and back imprints of a crucified man, is what draws the eye. A lot of people think it looks like Jesus of Nazareth. And for those who believe, it is a sacred snapshot, a mark made by the resurrection. However, the shroud is not clear. A miracle with a divine origin, a medieval fake, or something else totally. The cover. It was demonstrated by a French knight Desi in the 14th century in Lyre, France, that it initially became popular knowledge. Devotion and skepticism were sparked by its revelation. A local bishop was among those who doubted its veracity. The shroud's status as a sacred artifact didn't take root until it was housed at Tin in the late 15th century. But when science is involved, the riddle gets even deeper. Sacandopia, a lawyer and amateur photographer from Italy, captured the first images of the shroud in 1898. It was surprising what he saw when he developed the negatives. In the photographic negative, the picture showed up as a positive. Detailed and personable, it was better. A man's eerie visage materialized from the subtle stains on the fabric. Reigniting religious awe and scientific examination, this finding shook the world. How, however, was the picture created? There is still no response to this question. It is not a work of art. Absence of paints, dyes, and brushstrokes. The picture depicts a stain on the surface that solely influences the surface fibers of the fabric. No amount of cutting-edge technology has been able to replicate it. No amount of heat, light, acid, or any other material has been able to successfully replicate the image. It lacks conventional three-dimensionality. However, when analyzed digitally, the picture shows depth shading that matches human body contours. Given the circumstances of the Middle Ages, how is this ever possible? Evidence from a carbon dating experiment in 1988 appeared to put an end to the discussion. Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona labs examined the shroud and reached a firm decision. The cloth was from the years 1260 to 1390 AD. A médiévale fabrication à fraude. This wasn't a closed case, though. Skeptics quickly voiced their disapproval of the samples utilized. Were they salvaged from a patched area of fabric that had been soiled by generations of use? At least one fire in 1532, when the reliquary's molten silver burned holes through the fabric, was recorded as having spared the shroud. The nuns may have used different threads, potentially skewed threads, to repair the damage. Carbon dioxide emissions. The shroud might be far older than what carbon dating suggests. according to more modern investigations, such as spectrum imaging, pollen studies, and textile comparisons. The issue of blood then arises. Analyses of the reddish-brown dye stains on the fabric have identified hemoglobin and other substances typical of human blood. Roman techniques of crucifixion are consistent with the wounds. From anatomical perspectives, the figure is convincing. Some would even say too convincing to be a fake from the 13th or 14th century. No one would know very little about anatomy or medicine. Was it possible for someone in the Middle Ages to concoct such meticulous physiological realism? Are you asking why it is the case? Additionally, there are faint historical traces that suggest the shroud might have been around for a long time prior to its formal presentation in France. Identical portrayals of Christ appear in Byzantine art dating back to the 6th century, with long locks, a large nose, and unusual wounds. Constantinople may have been the original home of the cloth, according to some experts. The very artifact that is called the Mandelion or the picture of Edessa in the canonical Eastern Christian writings. Is it possible that the Shroud of Turin is one of several holy relics that have been misplaced or concealed due to centuries of conflict and turmoil? But does its antiquity guarantee its authenticity? Mystery does not necessarily mean authenticity, according to skeptics. Divinity cannot be proven by omission of explanation. Some people think that belief could be due to the image's strong psychological and emotional effects, producing the impression, finding faces, interpreting patterns, and deducing meaning from ambiguity are all tasks that the human brain excels at. The veil remains, though. Only a few times every 100 years is it put on exhibit. When it is, though, millions turn out to witness it. Standkvietli, pilgrims. Experts in the field have brought back brand new instruments. Christians behold Christ's face. For some, it remains an enigma. I don't understand this fabric. What is it? For what reasons does it continue to raise issues that neither science nor religion can satisfactorily resolve? Prove? What if, even more intriguingly, both are correct in ways we haven't fully figured out? Maybe the origins of the Shroud of Turin aren't the only things that make it mysterious. It's also about us, and our need to connect with the timeless and discover signs of the sacred in everyday things. Here we seek the threshold at which the corporeal and the ethereal merge. The fabric remains in its Turin storage room, motionless and inert, anticipating the next inquiry, the next revelation, the day when someone will have the courage to wonder not only what it is, but its continued significance. The most holy Arkansas. The Shroud is just the beginning of the mysterious trail. As our attention moves to a sacred artifact that inspires equal parts reverence and terror at the mere mention of it, the object becomes heavier and older. One of the greatest ancient mysteries is buried deep in biblical history, shrouded in mystery and quiet for ages. This is the Ark of the Covenant that is mentioned in Exodus. This ark was no average relic. Acacia wood was used for its construction and pure. Precious metal, a jeweled breast adorned with a pair of cherubim, their wings intertwined in the middle. However, its importance was not bestowed by the craftsmanship. The holy agreement between God and the Israelites, the 10 Commandments, were contained within the ark, according to Scripture. It was a vehicle for the heavenly presence, more than just a container. It was necessary for the triumph of armies. It divided rivers. The wicked were killed by it. Afterwards, it disappeared. We still don't know where the ark is today. Neither a cemetery nor a tomb. Merely rumors, traces, and tales, no proven artifacts, just ruins. Just as the desert winds once blew through the wilderness tabernacle, so too does the truth appear to change and disperse as one draws near. In the Hebrew Bible, the ark is last mentioned during King Josiah's reign, which occurred about the 7th century BC. The subsequent eerie quiet is unbearable. Was it destroyed in 586 BC when the first temple in Jerusalem was sacked by the Babylonians? Alternately, was it stowed away, hidden from the invaders? Reached, hidden by prophets or monks who predicted the impending disaster? A lot of people think the ark was hidden somewhere very secret. Ethiopian Orthodox Church monks assert that the Chapel of the Tablet, situated atop the Axum Highlands, is where the Ark is said to be kept. A small stone building that is guarded by a lone watcher who, once appointed, may never leave the premises. The Ark must remain hidden from prying eyes. The assertion persists despite the lack of evidence, photos, and third-party confirmation, handed down as holy knowledge from one generation to the next. Is it possible? How, therefore, did it make its way from Old Jerusalem to the mountainous Ethiopian plateau? In the midst of religious turmoil and idolatry during King Manasseh's reign, some believe that the Jewish priests took refuge in the south with the Ark. Theoretically, it could have been lowered into the Nile, buried at Elephantine, or transported to Egypt and beyond. This is in line with what is described in Ethiopian legend, which describes a connection between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, whose son Menelik is said to have secretly returned with the Ark after a journey to Jerusalem, accompanied by angels or by divine authority. The absence of any kind of archaeological proof, such as an old route, inscriptions, or verified sightings, is naturally cited by skeptics. Scholarly inquiry has never been welcomed by the chapel in Axum. However, the myth continues unabated. You can find other stories elsewhere. Owing to both of these factors, some people believe that the Ark is hidden beneath the Temple Mount in a vault that has been inaccessible to modern archaeologists for thousands of years. Political unrest and religious pretension. Some think the Knights Templar found the Ark when they were in Jerusalem during the Crusades. Others think they sneaked it into Europe and are keeping it hidden under castles or cathedrals. Claims have even been made that it could be connected to long-lost crypts in Rome or secret Vatican archives. On the other hand, there are the theories that are more arcane. What exactly was the Ark? Was it merely a chest? Researchers and fringe thinkers have both put forth the idea that its abilities might be characterized as deadly, brilliant, and astounding could be a clue to something more than just symbolic meaning. Is it some kind of antiquated energy gadget? Possibly a technical relic from a long-vanished civilization? Although these beliefs are far-fetched, they do hint at a more fundamental truth. The universal yearning to know the sacred not merely as myth, but as an actual, material, bodily entity. Even among adherents of the faith, there is more to the Ark than meets the eye. Covenant, obedience, and the dreadful nearness of God are all symbolized by it. People perished because the Ark was transported wrong, as stated in the Bible. Tragedies befell those who had taken it prisoner. King David transported it to Jerusalem with awe-inspiring ceremony and devotion when it was finally ready. If it ever existed, how could such a strong object disappear so entirely? The Ark of the Covenant is not only a relic. In it, we see the reflection of our need for evidence, for the divine to manifest, and for the world to bear the imprint of the divine. We excavate, we look, and we speculate in the vain hope that we may find the Ark and thereby close the gap between the known and the unknown. A mystery. Maybe it is the riddle, though. Maybe the Ark was always supposed to remain hidden. Regarding the tangible aspects, no. Maybe the point of the story was to challenge our faith rather than our archaeological skills. The Ark is still nowhere to be seen, either concealed or waiting. Between the realms of legend and recollection, between the solid and the ethereal, quietness is more powerful than expression. One can't help but ponder amid that stillness. What would occur if the Ark were to be discovered, if it were still in existence? Would he be able to ID it? Maybe its real strength has always rested in. It prompts us to wonder. In reality, what is the Ark of the Covenant? Something from a bygone era? Alternatively, something that will last indefinitely? Encased in a golden chalice and protected from the hands of time, the Holy Grail is the enigma of faith. As we go from the Ark of the Covenant and enter another vessel shrouded in deep mystery, we do not descend into a realm of tangible wealth, but into an ethereal one, where the pursuit of an elusive truth has consumed generations of believers. The way it is defined can vary. The Holy Grail, a name that reverberates across countries and centuries. Despite the lack of a defined form, and an established provenance. It could be anything as mundane as a cup or as mysterious as a relic of divine power. According to legend, Jesus used a certain dish during the Last Supper, a fragile chalice, brimming with wine and burdened with significance, was transferred from one shaking hand to another. Some say that while he was dying on the cross, this very cup caught his blood. Through that enigmatic, reverent, and quite mythological deed, an everyday item became one of the most famous artifacts from the past that are highly prized. And just where is it? Was it ever a thing? There is zero reference to the Grail in the first Christian writings. Yes, a cup is mentioned in the Gospels, but not in a sacred or regal sense. Several centuries after Jesus' life, a change takes place. A groundbreaking romance written by poetrette Dita in the 12th century changed the world. The legend of the Holy Grail, Perival. All of a sudden, the Grail became a representation of the enigmatic divine, concealed in a fortress that was known to the virtuous only, a kind spirit. That was long ago. Words like knights, quests, trials, and discoveries were woven throughout the allegory. Belief, however, can seep into legends. As time passed, the legends surrounding the Holy Grail became more intricate. It evolved into the Holy Grail of Arthurian legends, the object of devotion for the faithful and the preoccupation of monarchs. However, others started to question whether there was any reality to the myth, even as the tales became increasingly fantastical. Various European cathedrals and churches profess to hold the Holy Grail. The Santo Cales, a humble stone cup, is showcased in a Gothic chapel in Valencia, Spain. If the results of the carbon dating are correct, the cup could have been made in the 1st century BC, around the period that Jesus lived. Its foundation, meanwhile, is plainly medieval. Is it possible that this is the authentic, altered, and secretly stored cup? Some English people mention Glastonbury, a site that is rich in Christian history and Arthurian mythology. Legend has it that following Jesus' crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea hidden the Holy Grail on this very territory. Located close to the future site of Glastonbury Abbey, the waters of the famed Chalice Well, supposedly stained red from the blood it once contained, are believed to symbolize the location where the Holy Grail rests, where the site of the sacred thorn tree may be seen. But no concrete archaeological evidence has been found, and the tales continue to vacillate between fact and sacred myth. Some hypotheses link the Holy Grail to a family tree, while others link it to a symbol or even a concept rather than a specific cup. A minority of people hold the view that the Holy Grail was always a symbol of spiritual enlightenment rather than a real object, group, or for clandestine organizations that hold secret information. The common mind was captivated by such concepts in the 20th century. The Grail was said in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and subsequently in the Da Vinci Code to represent Christ's lineage, a heritage that had been hidden under centuries of church theology and authority. What was the Holy Grail, a kid or a cup? Despite its lack of evidence, this idea poses serious concerns. That is, why did the church decide to censor these books? Is it possible that What about the apocryphal traditions that differ from canonical scripture, the Gnostic Gospels or the Dead Sea Scrolls? Also, why were people attempting to safeguard the Grail if it was something to be concealed and not revered? Some have speculated that the Grail's origins lie outside of Europe, in pre-Christian traditions. Cauldrons of rebirth were mentioned by the Celt. The Persians had stories about holy containers that contained the light of the gods. Maybe the Holy Grail is a symbol that has been around since before Christianity, taken up and rethought by writers in the Middle Ages, in an effort to unite religion with myth. On the other hand, maybe it's all more straightforward and eerie. Perhaps the Holy Grail was nothing more than a cup, an ordinary item transformed into something exceptional by the event it bore witness to, an event that altered the trajectory of spiritual history. Could the early disciples have hidden it or kept it in that case? Can we even find it now? Hidden away in a cave, a vault, or a monastery, patiently awaiting. It remains unconfirmed. No archaeologist has ever handled it. However, we will keep looking. for the sake of more than simply a relic, let alone. Meaning it conveys objectivity, clarity, and revelation. There is more to the Holy Grail than meets the eye. That is a question that is woven into the very essence of religion. A cup is just a vessel. Why is this one picture stuck with people from many cultures and eras? Why are so many people still trying to find it? Is it because we look to the material universe for a connection to the spiritual? On the other hand, might it be that we sense a stronger connection to something everlasting just by searching it out? In any case, the Grail is never truly within grasp, only hinted at in tales, spoken in the river, engraved into dreams, and hinted at in stone. And the quest will go on indefinitely, so long as there remain unanswered questions, secrecy, and faith. Is it possible that the Holy Grail was meant to be followed rather than found? An unforgettable artifact. It is not uncommon for the pursuit of holy artifacts to take us further into the past, and even into positions of power, as seen in the darkened relic halls of European cathedrals and the peaceful sanctuaries of Glastonbury. And very few artifacts have such a gloomy, spellbinding charisma as the one supposedly pierced by the Holy Lance, the spear of fate or divinity itself. A cruel instrument of murder, and yet held in the highest esteem as a sacred artifact. It is a paradox in the making. As Jesus hung on the cross, a Roman soldier stabbed him in the side to certify his death, according to John's Gospel. The crucifixion appeared to have been completed as blood and water gushed from the wound. In subsequent accounts, the soldier is referred to as Longus. Legends are born out of violent and prophetic moments like these, reverberating across mighty kingdoms. However, the spear disappeared. The artifact that is purported to be the authentic sacred lance is currently housed in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, Austria, protected by glass encased in golden and iron. To the unknowing eye, it appears unremarkable, old, rusted metal from centuries ago. Still, this weapon has been revered, researched, and feared for ages. Some think that whomever held it would affect the fate of the globe, and emperors knelt before it, and conquerors desired it. Conceptually, the spear of fate bestows spiritual sovereignty over nations, triumph in combat, and authority did not develop in a vacuum. Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, the first to convert to Christianity, supposedly owned it. In 312 AD, he used it to win the Battle of the Milvian Bridge and launched his campaign to convert the empire to Christianity. Legend has it that Charlemagne never lost a fight while holding the spear in his hand. The spear fell from his fingers as he passed away, and his dominion quickly started to crumble. However, is it possible for an item actually influence how history unfolds? Or is faith in its efficacy sufficient to materialize it? Various Christian denominations staked claims to the real lance by the Middle Ages. During the First Crusade, one was unearthed in Antioch from beneath the cathedral's altar. A third one showed up in Armenia, and another one in Paris. The spear in Vienna, though, has been the center of the greatest discussion and scrutiny. The Hofburg lance, a type of spear, was first mentioned in writing around the year 800. A highly valued emblem, of the Holy Roman Emperors, who have been present at every coronation since their coronation. In time, it evolved into something more than just a weapon. It was an artifact with legal standing. Plus, it started to seem more and more like a prophecy as the ages passed. As time went on, the gloom grew. Multiple historical stories state that young Adolf Hitler visited Vienna to see the Spear of Destiny. The Nazis took the spear and other imperial artifacts to Nuremberg after decades, following the Anschluss of Austria in 1938. Ceremonial clothing. Some have hypothesized that Hitler had faith in its might and considered himself as the natural successor to previous conquerors who had previously used it. The unsettling symbolism was powerful regardless of its veracity. When World War II came to a close, American forces found the spear and sent it back to Vienna. However, the riddle remains. Is it possible for an artifact associated with such tragedy to have more than just symbolic value? Metallurgy is a line that skeptics use. According to scientific research, the Hofburg lance might not have been around in the 1st century AD, but instead of the 13th century. However, a nail that was embedded centuries later, and which some believe to be one of the original nails of the crucifixion, is located at its point. But there is no conclusive evidence, simply pieces and anecdotes, as is the case with many artifacts. Next, we have the more outlandish hypotheses. According to many esoteric traditions, the spear served a dual purpose, as a weapon used by the Romans and as a tool for penetrating both the physical and ethereal realms. They mention mystical powers, long-lost privileges, and links to other relics of power. The spear, according to these critics, is more powerful than the metal or the blood it contains because it represents the meeting point of empire and sacrifice, of violence and sanctity. When you wield the sword that killed the Messiah, what does it signify? Could it be a salvation artifact or a remnant of sin? For ages, the Holy Lands have been a reflection of both those who want to dominate the world and those who want to comprehend it better. Whereas some perceive it as a sign of divine justice, others view it as a curse. But whether it's based on religion or superstition, it keeps drawing people. The purpose of arousing awe or dread. What gives the impression that some things, even the most basic, old, and painstakingly crafted ones, carry the burden of time? And if power can be transferred from story to symbol, what happens when conviction and ambition collide? Once again, the spear of fate lies in Vienna, hushed behind glass, its edge worn down by the passage of time, but its legend untarnished. The question reverberates across Goltha to empires, churches, and battlefields, and it remains unanswered. What would you do if you had it in your hands? Evolve into? Those years that Jesus did not publicly proclaim. It all started with artifacts thought to possess heavenly powers, crafted from wood and metal. Something much more evasive has now captured our focus. Not an item in the literal sense, but rather its lack. There is a deep and disturbing void in the historical record that has caused people to speculate for millennia. Notice what we don't see anything? That's what matters. An enigma not inscribed in stone, but in the intervals between words. The years that Jesus of Nazareth did not live. What the Gospels record is the account of a miraculous birth, a fleeting encounter with the temple when I was 12 years old. And then there is complete silence until he re-emerges at the age of 30, having been baptized in the Jordan River and prepared to launch a ministry that would alter the trajectory of history. 18 years with no trace. During those 18 years, Christianity as a primary figure vanishes from the pages. How did he disappear? Who is this guy? Who is keeping quiet about this? A few of academics have argued that this difference is completely explicable. The fact that Jesus, like many other young men of his day, led a peaceful existence in Nazareth, a carpenter who waits for his assigned time to come while providing for his family. They claim that the lack of sound is not cause for alarm. The void between youth and fate is merely the lack of conflict. Silence, though, is more powerful than words for some. It is hard to believe that a life of radical teaching, profound insight, and profound transformation could have come from a little town in Galilee on its own. On the other hand, maybe he traveled great distances during that time, traversing mountains, deserts, and perhaps civilizations, all in quest of wisdom that would influence. What was his objective? The long-lived belief is that Jesus went eastward, touching down in India and even Tibet. For generations, these regions have been thriving centers of old spiritual practices. His contemporaries think he absorbed the wisdom of Hindu mystics, Buddhist monks, or Zoroastrian priests. Some believe that scrolls kept in a monastery in Hemsis, Lydda, northern India, pertain to a saintly character by the name of Isa, a Western teacher who preached compassion, healed the ill, even though his own people later turned against him. Many researchers immediately rejected the life of Saint Isa as a fabrication, despite its first 19th century reporting by a Russian traveler named Nicholas Notovic, which sparked worldwide curiosity. Some said the monastery had buried the records when demand from outside countries grew, while others maintained that the abbey did not own them. No authentic manuscript has been created up till now. Still, the tale goes on. Is it possible that Jesus came into contact with Eastern spiritual philosophies? It has been suggested that parables, an emphasis on inner purity, a rejection of worldly wealth, and the invitation to love one's enemies are all shared aspects of his teachings that are reminiscent of those found in Buddhism and Vedanta. Is it the result of shared cultural wisdom or reflections on one's own life experiences? Other hypotheses keep him grounded. A mystical Jewish sect known as the Essenes may have impacted his thought process. They resided in the Judean wilderness close to Qumran, the site of the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery. Aestheticism, ritual, and the Essenes. Cleansing and a profound commitment to prophecy. Is it possible that Jesus hung out with them, reading the scriptures and getting ready for his mission? Another school of thought holds that the Holy Family may have sought shelter in Egypt during their early Christian era. At the ancient city of Alexandria, thinkers from all over the world converged, including Greek mystics, Jewish philosophers, and the last vestiges of Egyptian religious knowledge. As a young man, might Jesus have explored those temples and libraries, gaining the ability to communicate with people from all walks of life through just one voice? We do not have evidence for any of these claims. Traditional historians tend to disregard most of them. Even so, there's still interest. Why? The reason being that the teachings that surfaced during the Silence Time were completely novel. A message of mercy rather than wrath. Not of empire, but of inward development. Where is this coming from? What did Jesus discover in the peace and quiet of Nazareth if he stayed there? Has the passage of time erased any professor's scrolls or conversations from this era? Instead, did the stillness serve as the instructor? Were his formative years influenced by journey, if not via quiet reflection, the cadence of rural life, and the hardships endured by the common people? Why, therefore, does each gospel fail to address this particular point? Some think it was on purpose that the first writers ignored mundane matters in favor of focusing on the heavenly mission. Some people think that accounts of those years did exist, but have since been lost or buried by doctrine or time. Perhaps generations of copying, compiling, rather than conspiracy, destroyed what truths. And selecting? Disagreements arose even among early Christians over what happened. A more esoteric and mystical Jesus, molded by inner revelation rather than exterior tradition, is hinted to in a few of the Gnostic Gospels. Could it be that the years that aren't mentioned represent a disagreement regarding Jesus' identity, rather than a gap in his biography? In the end, there's still no answer. It's a lost window of opportunity, not on paper or in rubble, but in one's mind. However, maybe for that reason it remains. Reason being, Jesus' lost years are not only historical. They remain as a place of mystery, unanswered questions, and unexplored paths for the time being. Why did those years slip away? A mysterious path that molded the most mysterious educator history has ever seen, or complete stillness. Where we start our search if the truth is still out there. Fragments of the true cross. We leave the stillness of the years gone by and enter a space that is not. Not in whole, but in bits and pieces, in hallowed shards that lay claim to bearing the burden of past, present, and future salvation. These shards, found in reliquaries, jeweled crosses, gilded altars, and cathedrals, convey a tale of mystery, redemption, and anguish. According to popular belief, these artifacts are fragments of the actual cross that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified upon. Would a wooden cross be able to withstand the test of time? Then how can we tell the truth from fiction, if that's the case? Based on Christian theory. According to tradition, about 300 years following the crucifixion, in the beginning of the 4th century, the cross was found. Someone had moved the Roman Empire. An oppressed religion, Christianity, was on the rise. Emperor Constantine's mother Helena set out for Jerusalem at that time to uncover the material evidence of Christ's crucifixion. According to the accounts passed down through the ages by church historians, a miraculous find was made close to the spot where the holy sepulchre church would later stand. Rumor has it that Helena found 3 burial sites for crosses covered in dirt and debris. A test was set up since it was unclear which one had belonged to Jesus. They brought a dying woman forward, and she was healed as soon as her hand touched one of the crosses. Vera Cruz, the Real Cross, was that cross's official designation. After then, the plot really starts to take off. Jerusalem became the permanent home to some of the cross's fragments, while Constantinople and Rome received others. Churches and monarchs all over Europe received their fair portion as the pieces were split and distributed over time. During the Middle Ages, Christendom's most revered and hotly debated artifacts were the genuine cross's relics. However, uncertainty and mystery start to blend at this point. Doubters, such as the Protestant reformer John Calvin, began to make fun of the abundance of artifacts in the 16th century. According to his writing, a ship may be filled with all the pieces. Did religion allow for imitation, or was the actual cross infinitely divisible? Contemporary researchers have made efforts to follow the routes taken by these artifacts, but the paths are broken and muddled due to the passage of time. Destruction, plunder, and loyalty. The destruction of Constantinople in 1204 caused the loss of several of these items. Some were hidden during the Reformation, while others were taken during the Crusades. While some pieces have been misplaced or destroyed in the French Revolution, others can be found in reliquaries in places like Brussels, Rome, Venice, and even tiny chapels in outlying towns. Are any of them genuine? It is not easy to conduct scientific analysis. Testing most artifacts is taboo because of their hallowed status. Once testing is authorized, they show just a limited amount. A fragment of long-gone wood, a hint of resin, which could be from the correct era or it could be much later. But even if the piece is ancient, how can we establish that it was crucified or that it rested on Golgotha in the shadow of a cloudy sky? That it is irrelevant is a point that some believers make. A cross made of wood is not the real thing. It embodies emblem, existence, and mystique. Some are more skeptical and question whether the whole Helena myth was an attempt to establish Christianity's actual presence in Jesus Christ and establish the expanding Christian empire in Jerusalem. Curious details remain, though. Indeed, Helena's pilgrimage took place. Archaeological digs beneath the Holy Sepulchre have uncovered Roman-era structures that are consistent with biblical accounts, and she did commission churches on holy ground. Is it possible that there are historical artifacts buried in the myth that hold some truth? Some go so far as to say that the cross was purposefully concealed in various places, such as behind altars, sealed within walls, or even whisked away by codes of conduct in the midst of oppression. According to these narratives, the Real Cross remained in place throughout. It only retreated underground, patiently awaiting its next unveiling. There are even weirder hypotheses, such as the idea that a specific tree planted at the beginning of time provided the wood for the cross. According to some stories, it originated in Eden and then made its way to Solomon's temple via Noah's Ark. Rather than being records of events, these are sacred stories meant to inspire awe. But even so, they show us how fundamental the concept. On the path that crosses, imagination and theology both play a role. Why does the cross inspire so much emotion in people? To grieve, to go on pilgrimages, and even to fight. Maybe it's the irony of it all. A tool of oppression reimagined as a sign of liberation. A means of destruction turned into a beacon of light. Feeling connected to something enormous. Something that touched both redemption and anguish is possible with even a fraction of it, whether genuine or imagined. The number of churches professing to hold pieces of the actual cross continues to grow. Even smaller ones exist. Shards showcased in gilded cases, touched by revered pilgrims, protected by ordained clergy. Some have fallen into oblivion in dusty reliquaries, their origins lost to the passage of time. In Jerusalem, the Holy Sepulchre Church continues to attract millions of visitors who come to walk among the ancient stones where Helena is said to have knelt to gather wood. Still, somewhere between religion and history, the question lurks. Could the cross ever have been located? Are we still able to go among its ruins today? Is it possible that we will never stop searching for the sacred, not in what has survived, but in what we imagine will discover someplace? Maybe a piece is stashed away. On the other hand, maybe the truth has long since been dispersed and forgotten, and the only thing that can reunite the fragments is faith. When the Real Cross is finally found, will we know what to do with it? Would we honor it, split it apart again, or secretly question if the enigma was more potent without it? The enigma of artifacts. We are now entering a region where the true cross lies in shattered pieces, mingled with murmurs of hallowed presence. Rendezvous in the most personal manner. Ancient artifacts scattered across a vast landscape. Human remains, bones, hair, clothing, blood, rather than stone carvings representing abstract ideas. In cathedrals resonating with the scent of incense and the light of candles rest the bodies of the saints who were once held in gilded reliquaries concealed behind thick glass. With grave respect, these pieces are on exhibit. A golden finger bone, a silver-crowned skull, and a bottle supposedly holding blood that melts on holy days. Continents have been traversed by pilgrims seeking solace and renewal for ages at these sacred sites. Connection. But what are these artifacts precisely? Also, how well-informed are we about them? Christian tradition is rich with the adoration of saints' relics. The early Christians, who believed that the remains of martyrs had spiritual power, began congregating at their graves as early as the 2nd century AD. Not merely monuments, they were believed to be channels via which the divine might travel from heaven to earth. The method changed as time went on. Historical artifacts were no longer kept at cemeteries. The objects were transferred, divided, and dispersed. Religious establishments were constructed atop burial mounds, with altars set straight atop skeletons. During the Middle Ages, practically every European church laid claim to a holy artifact. A few of them had hundreds. No longer was a saint's physical form merely a physical form. It was a holy map, a wellspring of miracles, and occasionally a contentious issue. However, these artifacts have always been shrouded in mystery. Think about the relic of Saint Catherine of Siena, her virginal head in Siena, her foot in Venice, and her corpse in Rome, or the various houses of worship that profess to have remains of John the Baptist. Among the pieces found are his arm, his head, and other, more enigmatic pieces. Then there are the assertions that are more perplexing. It is reported that even after death, St. Anthony's rosy and supple tongue lingered. Still protected under glass is St. Vincent de Paul's heart. Multiple times a year, the blood of St. Januarius in Naples goes from solid to liquid, a phenomenon that continues to baffle scientists. Do you think these occurrences are miracles or merely normal occurrences? Carbon dating, genetic analysis, and historical cross-referencing are some of the modern scientific methods used to assess the authenticity of these artifacts. The outcomes are often problematic or lack clarity. A few of the bones are from the wrong era. Throughout the ages of worship, commerce, and conflict, some artifacts have been copied or labeled incorrectly. The medieval world's insatiable appetite for artifacts led to widespread practice of forgeries, the sanctification of bones whose provenance was uncertain, and, in extreme circumstances, the veneration of several bodies as the identical saint. Even still, there's more at play than just the question of veracity, and the stories continue to circulate. Tourists want to experience what they see when they visit historical sites. Sitting beside a skull thought to belong to St. Thomas Aquinas while praying is like sitting near history, close to a life once full of contemplation and sacrifice. How reliable the artifact is as far as forensics is concerned. Here, you will feel the reality. This is a serious commitment. An air of calm reverence and hopeful expectation permeates the air around such locations. However, weirder facets to that enigma. The canon states that some saints have managed to stay immortal. The so-called incorruptibles are those whose bodies, unaltered by imbuement or other forms of preservation, are able to withstand the test of time. Blessed Bernardet of Lourdes, whose body has been miraculously preserved for almost a century after she died. Burial circumstances, natural mummification, or subsequent wax coatings are sometimes blamed by scientists for these instances. Explanations are inadequate in some cases. Healing relics, curses connected to disturbed relics, and relics claimed to possess active power are all further categories of artifacts. Is still there. Relics that omit scent or shed tears are the stuff of legend. Thousands of people assemble in Naples when legend has it that St. Januarius's blood turns to liquid. As a result of its ineffectiveness, panic ensues, which some see as a sign of impending doom. According to Eastern Orthodox belief, the odor of holiness is a beautiful, inexplicable aroma that can be detected on occasion when studying saints' relics. There is never any mention of a chemical source. Is it possible that these occurrences are purely psychological, set off by the combination of centuries of ritual, religion, and suggestion? Or is it possible that there is some aspect of substance and spirit that remains after death that we have yet to fully comprehend? Powerful artifacts have also been fashioned from relics. Having a relic of a saint was considered a blessing in medieval Europe. They were coveted by cities. Conflicts sprung out due to them. Saints' relics were revered for their sanctity, but they were also thought to have a strategic purpose, shielding communities from disasters like drought, invasion, or plague. Holy theft is a euphemism for the theft of priceless artifacts, frequently provided justification through what were believed to be dreams or visions received directly from the saints. Relics, however, persist even in this modern, secular world. They are kept in tiny silver lockets worn by the faithful and kept locked in chapels or carried in processions. They still evoke feelings of mystery, devotion, and pilgrimage. New artifacts are being made in several regions of the globe. Merchandise believed to have absorbed the energy of a saint, such as garments touched to their tomb or locks preserved from holy men and women. Not in the sense of a bygone era, but as something that is full with life. Thus, we remain beset with inquiries. Do these relics actually represent what they say they do? Do they reflect our yearning or serve as reflections of the holy? Why, in a scientifically advanced world, do we still bow down to inanimate objects made of flesh and blood? How can we find it? Restorative evidence, a feeling of the everlasting. Maybe it's not the artifacts themselves that have power, but the significance they hold. Maybe the reason their enigma persists is that they beckon us to think that purity does not fade with the passage of time, that a remnant of the holy endures. Beyond the grave, perhaps a long-lost shard is still stashed away in a dusty reliquary, behind an altar that very few people pay any attention to anymore. In the stillness of a bone, a fragment of a once luminous being, a murmur of holiness. From the holy relics of saints to something far more remarkable, incorruptible bodies are present. Now we're going to investigate a riddle that goes against the grain of mortality and the laws of nature. Mortal remains, calm features, unblemished skin, preserved limbs, lie in silent churches and behind glass coffins across the globe, in a situation when it ought to be hard. The bodies of these people, who perished centuries ago yet still bear almost no visible symptoms of deterioration, are known as incorruptibles. For the devout, they are works of miracles. Scientists consider them outliers. They remain an enigma to the annals of time. The inside of the near, France, shrine of St. Bernardet is dimly lit. The lifeless body of a young woman who passed away in 1879 lies behind a glass casket there. It would appear that the Lord's visionary, St. Bernardet Soubirous, is sound asleep. Her face is composed, her skin is soft, and her hands are folded. There has been no sign of decay in the over 100 years since her interment. The lack of odor, intact organs, and flexible limbs were remarked by medical examiners who inspected her corpse many times. Another example is Saint Sylvan, whose remains are in the Croatian church of St. Blay. He seems to have flawless skin and a face that has not aged a bit. He passed away more over 7,000 years ago, but his remains appear to be in remarkably good condition, even by scientific standards for a guy of late 4th century AD. How is this possible? Throughout Catholic history, incorruptibility has been seen as an indication of favor from on high. Even though the Church doesn't say anything about supernaturally preserving these bodies, it does acknowledge incorruptibility as a sign that a person's life may be holy. The phenomena is strongly ingrained in the vocabulary of awe and respect. Even if not all saints are incorrupt or all incorrupt bodies belong to canonized saints. Research by historians has revealed instances of undamaged remains lasting more than a millennium. In most cases, the discovery occurred during an exhumation, which aimed to either relocate the saint's bones to a more visible spot or confirm their identity in preparation for beatification. Much of the time, their discoveries shocked them. Instead of decaying, the bodies were maintained, whole and malleable, with their burial clothes still on. Were there any possible natural causes? Yes, in certain cases. Environmental variables are being cited by scientists. Cold, desiccated air, earth rich in minerals, and airtight tombs with minimal oxygen. There are extremely unusual circumstances in which mummification can occur naturally. Some people think that the soil's antibacterial chemicals, dampness, or the things around the remains preserve them inadvertently. While intentional embalming was occasionally employed, it is often mentioned in church records and is not included in claims of incorruptibility. However, academics are still baffled by a few instances, despite their answers. For example, consider the little case of Saint Zeta Luca, 1272 deceased servant girl, like Saint Catherine Labourette, whose exhumed remains was recovered in 1933, 57 years after her death, with skin and soft tissue that seemed as good as new, despite the lack of known preservation methods. Her body was found nearly 300 years later in an almost flawless condition, free of traces of embalming. The accounts of corpses emitting a pleasant floral aroma, sometimes called the odor of holiness, are even more mysterious. When favorable weather, tomb conditions, or embalming cannot explain preservation. Skeptics and the remaining unknown. Be wary about making hasty assumptions. They point out that restoration is a common practice when showing off undamaged bodies to the public. Faces covered with wax masks, hands painted, clothes changed. What seems miraculous is often at least partially the product of human effort, while occasionally it may be the case. Some remains have been maintained in an unnatural form, unprocessed, and hauntingly preserved. Is it possible that something about the experienced life itself, rather than merely the physical form, defies the passage of time? Quite a few. Those who were completely pure were those who truly humbled themselves, lived in poverty, and devoted themselves spiritually. Many of these people went unrecognized while they were alive, but they were worshipped after death. Maybe incorruptibility is just a symbol, a physical representation of how pure we really are. Alternately, is it conceivable that our current understanding of some biological or even energy phenomena is incomplete? Incorruptibility, according to some fringe theories, might be linked to vibrational states, long periods of meditation, altered states of consciousness, or harmonizing with natural frequencies that impact the physical form lastingly. These ideas remain unproven, but they point to a persistent truth. We still do not fully understand what causes the body to decay, or in these rare cases, to resist decay. Perhaps that is why the incorruptibles remain so compelling. They do not shout. They do not perform signs or wonders. They simply lie still, quiet witnesses to a mystery we cannot solve. What is preserved in these bodies? Is it just flesh or a trace of something eternal? Do these rare cases point us toward a deeper understanding of life and death, holiness and nature, spirit and matter? Or are they like so many relics of faith, a question left deliberately unanswered, an invitation to look closer, to sit with wonder, and to imagine that perhaps even in death, the sacred leaves a mark. In the end, the incorruptibles ask nothing of us. They do not speak, but perhaps they still have something to say. The secrets of Fatima, from the stillness of incorrupt bodies, where the sacred seems to resist time itself. We move now to a field in rural Portugal, a place once quiet and unremarkable. Until one spring morning in 1917, 3 children said they saw something that would echo through history. Light descending from the sky, a woman radiant standing above the trees, and with her messages, prophecies, warnings. This is Fatima, a small town north of Lisbon, surrounded by olive groves and open hills. Fatima became the center of one of the most mysterious religious events of the 20th century. It was here that 3 shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos, age 10, and her cousins Francisco and Hindamardo, age 9 and 7, claimed they saw the Virgin Mary, beginning on May 13, 1917. The figure appeared 6 times over the course of that year. She spoke not only of prayer and repentance, but revealed what became known as the 3 secrets of Fatima. Messages shrouded in mystery, later released by the church in stages, and still the subject of intense debate. What did these children see? Were they touched by the divine or caught in something deeper, stranger? Witnesses say that on the day of the final apparition, October 13, 1917, a crowd of over 70,000 people gathered. Rain had soaked the ground. The sky was gray. But then something happened. The rain stopped. The clouds parted and the sun, according to reports, began to spin. It pulsed with unnatural color. It zigzagged. It danced across the sky. Eyewitnesses described it as falling toward the earth before returning to its place in the sky. This moment, now known as the miracle of the sun, was widely reported in Portuguese newspapers. Scientists, skeptics, and believers alike were confounded. Some suggested mass hallucination, a natural meteorological phenomenon, or retinal afterimages. Others were certain this was a sign from heaven. But if the sun's movement stunned the crowd, it was the secrets given to the children that ignited global speculation. The first secret, as later revealed by Sister Lucia in her memoirs, was a vision of hell, a place of fire and despair. The second predicted the end of World War I, and the beginning of another, even worse war if humanity did not repent. It also spoke of the rise of Soviet communism and the persecution of the church. Both were revealed publicly in 1941. But the third secret that would remain hidden for nearly 6 decades, locked away by the Vatican, feeding decades of curiosity and conspiracy. What had the Virgin told a 10-year-old girl that was so sensitive it could not be released to the world? For years, speculation swirled. Some believed the third secret predicted a global apocalypse, nuclear war, the fall of the papacy, the collapse of the church itself. Others suggested it spoke of betrayal from within or a great deception at the heart of modern faith. It wasn't until the year 2000 that the Vatican finally released what it said was the full text. According to their account, the secret described a vision, a bishop dressed in white climbing a mountain, passing through a ruined city, praying for the souls of the dead before being killed by soldiers. Alongside him, others, bishops, priests, religious, and lay people, all martyred. The Church interpreted this as a symbolic vision of the 20th century suffering, the 2 world wars, the persecution of Christians, and the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. The bullet that struck him was later placed in the crown of the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. And yet, not everyone was convinced. Some believe the full third secret has never been revealed. They point to inconsistencies in Vatican statements to documents suggesting that more was written perhaps a separate, unshared letter. Even Cardinal Ratzinger, before becoming Pope Benedict XVI, once hinted that the unreleased portion might concern dangers to the faith rather than global catastrophe. Was there something the Church withheld? Something too controversial, too destabilizing? And what of Lucia herself, the only surviving visionary who later became a cloistered nun? She lived until 2005 under the close watch of the Church. rarely speaking publicly. Her writings, while sincere, were always carefully filtered. Did she carry knowledge that could never be shared? Or did the message simply become distorted over time, amplified by those who wanted more from it than what was truly given? There are other mysteries as well. The children, though uneducated and young, spoke of profound theological matters with striking clarity. Both Hassa and Francisco died young, as the Virgin reportedly foretold. Lucia, meanwhile, lived into her 90s. She once claimed that the full meaning of the Fatima secrets would only become clear in time, suggesting that their relevance might stretch far into the future. To this day, Fatima remains a place of pilgrimage. Millions travel there each year, praying in the chapel of the apparitions, lighting candles, walking the same path the children once did. Some come seeking healing, others answers. But the mystery of Fatima is not just about the past. It continues to speak to the modern world about the possibility of vision, of message, of something beyond the visible, about the delicate balance between revelation and secrecy. Did 3 children truly receive a warning from heaven? Was the miracle of the sun a sign of divine intervention or mass wonder? And if part of the message remains hidden, what could be so powerful, so urgent that it had to be sealed away? Perhaps the real mystery is not what was said, but what it continues to inspire. A quiet field in Portugal, transformed by light and silence, still asking a question that has no easy answer. What does it mean when heaven speaks? The miracle of the sun, just beyond the rolling hills of Fatima, where the olive trees lean in quiet prayer and the air still seems to remember what happened there, lies the Cova Deer, a field once quiet, now sacred. It was here on October 13th, 1917, that a crowd of tens of thousands gathered under dark, rain-filled skies. They had come in faith, in fear, and in wonder, drawn by 3 shepherd children who said the Virgin Mary had promised a miracle. What they witnessed would echo through the world, ripple through time, and stir questions that remain unanswered to this day. It became known as the miracle of the sun. Eyewitness accounts vary in detail, but share a haunting similarity. As the rain ceased and the clouds gave way, the sun appeared to burst free from the sky. It spun rapidly, casting waves of color across the landscape. Yellow, blue, violet. It shuddered, it pulsed, then in a motion that defied every law of nature. It seemed to lurch from the sky, falling toward the earth in a zigzag motion before returning to its place. Some collapsed in fear, others wept in joy. Many thought it was the end of the world. This was not a private vision. It was witnessed by journalists, skeptics, farmers, clergy, and government officials, people of all kinds, most of whom had no connection to the children or their claims. Estimates of the crowd range from 30,000 to 70,000. Portuguese newspapers, including O Século, reported the event widely. Even those who came to mock left stunned. But what exactly did they see? The church would later declare it a genuine miracle, a confirmation of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima. Pilgrims came by the millions in the years that followed. A basilica was built. The children were canonized. And yet, the event itself, raw, visual, and public, has continued to resist easy explanation. Could it have been a natural phenomenon? Some scientists have suggested a rare atmospheric event called a parhelion or sun-dog caused by light refracting through ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. Others point to the psychological effect of staring at the sun, which can produce visual distortions, retinal burns, and even hallucinations. But many witnesses describe looking away and still seeing the phenomenon reflected across the landscape. And multiple photographers on site failed to capture any distortion on film, suggesting it was not purely optical or internal to the eye. What about mass hysteria? Skeptics argue that anticipation, emotion, and suggestion could have created a kind of shared illusion. After all, the crowd came expecting a miracle. The atmosphere was charged with hope, fear, and spiritual intensity. But with thousands of people, many of them not even believers, hallucinate in unison, And if so, why do their accounts include consistent concrete details, the spinning, the colors, the drying of soaked clothes and mud-drenched ground? Then there are the theories that stretch further. Some fringe researchers have posited celestial anomalies, solar flares, electromagnetic events, or even unidentified aerial phenomena. Could there have been something momentary and rare? A convergence of natural forces we still don't understand? Others whisper about messages from beyond, divine or otherwise. Was the sun's movement symbolic, a sign not of nature, but of intervention? One of the most curious aspects of the event was its physicality. The ground, drenched with rain moments before, was reportedly dry after the event. Mud vanished. Clothes that had been soaked were suddenly warm and clean. Witnesses described a sensation of heat, not from the sun, but from something else. If the event was purely visual, how did it alter the environment? And then there is the silence of modern science. Despite decades of inquiry, no conclusive theory has explained the event in terms that satisfy both reason and witness. The Vatican, for its part, does not impose belief in the miracle as a requirement of faith. It acknowledges the event as worthy of devotion, but leaves room for mystery. Perhaps that's what Fatima has always been about. Not proving, but pondering. Not solving, but surrendering to something greater than understanding. What makes the dancing sun so powerful is not just what was seen, but when and how. In the shadow of World War I, in a time of turmoil and uncertainty, thousands gathered in a field and something happened. Something that challenged their senses, their fears, and their understanding of the heavens. Was it divine? Was it psychological? Was it a moment when time bent slightly and the boundary between heaven and earth grew thin? Or is it possible that the miracle still lingers, not in the sky, but in the question itself? The sun no longer spins above Fatima, but the memory remains. The field is quiet again, but beneath its silence lies a ripple that refuses to fade. And as we look upward, as others once did on that gray October day, we are left to wonder, what did they see? What really happened when the sun danced in the sky? And what if even now it's still dancing just beyond the reach of our reason? The black stone of Mecca. As the echoes of Fatima fade into the realm of light and sky, we now travel to a very different kind of sacred mystery, one rooted not in visions or prophecy, but in stone. In the heart of the great mosque of Mecca, surrounded by the constant circling movement of millions of pilgrims, sits a small object of immense reverence, set into the southeastern corner of the Kaaba. It is dark, smooth, and worn by countless touches. This is the black stone Al-Hajar al-Asad, a relic so ancient, so enigmatic that its true origins have long been the subject of faith, fascination, and debate. Unlike many other religious artifacts, the black stone is not hidden away in a glass case or kept behind guarded doors. It is there, visible, accessible, though heavily protected during pilgrimage seasons, encased in a silver frame, and kissed by the faithful who can reach it. It is not large, perhaps the size of a melon, and has broken into several pieces over time, now held together by the ornate frame. Its surface is dark, almost black, and said to emit a subtle, otherworldly scent. But what is it, and where did it come from? In Islamic tradition, the black stone was sent from heaven. According to Hadith, it was given to the prophet Abraham, and his son Ismail as they constructed the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam. It is said that the stone was once white, radiant, and pure, but darkened over time by the sins of humanity. For Muslims, it is not an object of worship, but of remembrance, a symbol of divine presence and a touch point with the sacred history of the Abrahamic tradition. Yet, despite its central role in ritual, the stone's material nature remains a mystery. Geologists, historians, and archaeologists have long speculated about its origin. Is it a meteorite, an object that truly came from the heavens in a literal sense? Some have proposed this, citing its unusual luster, metallic ring when struck, and smooth surface. Could it be a form of glass, created by a lightning strike or volcanic activity, or a type of agate or basalt polished over centuries of contact. Scientific study is limited. The black stone has never been subject to full geological analysis. Its location inside the Kaaba places it in one of the most protected and revered spaces on Earth. For believers, the question of its composition may even feel irrelevant. Its power is not in what it is, but in what it represents. Still, the theories persist. Some accounts from travelers and historians over the centuries describe the stone as warm to the touch with a texture unlike any known material. Others say it has changed in appearance over time from bright to dark, from whole to fractured. Was it damaged during times of conflict? Or has it always been fragmentary, a relic, carried across ages and empires? There is also the matter of its survival. The Kaaba has been rebuilt multiple times by the Kur tribe before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and several times afterward due to flooding, fires, and conflict. The black stone, however, has remained moved, yes, but preserved. During one such rebuilding before Islam, the tribes of Mecca nearly came to blows over who would place the stone in its sacred position. It was the young Muhammad who resolved the dispute, placing the stone on a cloth and inviting the tribal leaders to lift it together. He then guided it into place himself. This moment, peaceful, symbolic, cemented the stone's place not only in the structure of the Kaaba, but in the very spirit of Islam, a symbol of unity. And yet, even within this unity, questions linger. Some fringe theories go further. They suggest the black stone may be a relic from a long-lost civilization, perhaps one that predated recorded history in the Arabian Peninsula. Others speculate it could be connected to celestial events, an ancient marker for astronomical alignments, or a signpost used by ancient star-worshipping cultures long before the rise of monotheism in the region. These ideas are not supported by Islamic tradition, but they speak to the larger human impulse to search for meaning in what endures. There are even tales largely apocryphal of those who attempted to steal or damage the stone. In the 10th century, a radical group known as the Karmatans looted Mecca and took the black stone, carrying it to their stronghold in eastern Arabia. It was gone for over 20 years before it was returned. Some claim the stone now in Mecca is not the original. Others believe it was broken during that time and reassembled. But once again, history is silent where speculation grows. Could a single object truly carry such weight across so many centuries? Could stone hold memory not only of human touch, but of something more? In the end, the black stone remains both utterly real and profoundly mysterious. It is there visible to all, touched by millions. Yet, what lies at its core, its origin, its composition, its secret history, remains hidden, wrapped in faith and reverence. What if it truly did come from beyond this world, not as a metaphor, but as a fact? What if its darkness does not only reflect the sins of humanity, but the unknowable depths of time? Or what if the black stone is something even simpler? A piece of earth that through devotion became more than stone. It still rests in the corner of the Kaaba, timeless, unmoved, waiting. And as the pilgrims circle around it, year after year, it continues to ask the same silent question. What do we see when we look into the heart of something sacred? The Israel and Mirage. From the ancient stones set in the wall of the Kaaba, a silent witness to centuries of devotion, we now move to a mystery that lifts us from earth into the realm of the heavens. It is a journey spoken of with awe and reverence, woven into the fabric of Islamic belief, not merely as legend, but as a moment where the veil between the physical and the divine was drawn back. This is the Isra and Mirage, the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad. It begins in the stillness of the night in Mecca. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad was resting near the Kaaba when he was awakened by the angel Gabriel, who presented him with a mysterious steed called a lac. Described as dazzling white, swift as lightning, and larger than a mule, but smaller than a horse, this celestial creature would carry the prophet on the first leg of an extraordinary journey. The Isra or journey took him from Mecca to the farthest mosque, Masjid al-Aqsa, in Jerusalem. Today, that mosque is believed to be located on the Temple Mount near the Golden Dome of the Rock. It is one of the holiest places in Islam. Standing on that plateau, surrounded by the ancient stones of prophets long past, one can almost feel the quiet echo of something beyond time. According to tradition, upon arriving in Jerusalem, Muhammad led a congregation of earlier prophets in prayer. Among them, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. It was a moment of unity across ages, a symbol of continuity rather than division. But this was only the beginning. From that sacred place, the journey turned upward. This was the mirage, the ascension, accompanied once more by Gabriel. The prophet is said to have ascended through the seven heavens, encountering prophets and angelic hosts along the way. In the first heaven, he met Adam. In the second, John the Baptist and Jesus. In the third, Joseph, then Idris, then Aaron, then Moses, and finally in the seventh heaven, Abraham. Each encounter was marked by peace and recognition. Each step a transition from the earthly to the divine. Beyond the seventh heaven, the prophet was brought to Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lot tree of the utmost boundary. In Islamic cosmology, this is the outermost edge of creation where knowledge and reality stop and only God remains. There Muhammad is said to have received directly from God the commandment of daily prayer, initially 50, later reduced to 5 after conversations with Moses during the return descent. This event, sacred and central, is not merely a story of physical travel. It is understood by many scholars and theologians as a multidimensional experience, part spiritual, part miraculous, unfolding beyond the limits of human perception. The Quran itself references the journey briefly in Surah Al-Isra. Glory be to him who took his servant by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque whose surroundings we have blessed. The details are expanded upon in hadith literature, preserved through centuries of transmission. But how are we to understand it? For believers, the journey is a miracle, one that affirms the prophet's role, reveals the unseen structure of the cosmos, and brings divine guidance into human life. It is commemorated annually on the 27th night of Rajab, marked by reflection, prayer, and awe. For those looking through a historical or analytical lens, the night journey poses questions that defy empirical logic. Was it bodily? Was it visionary? Islamic scholars across generations have discussed both views with deep respect. Some hold that the journey occurred in spirit, others in both body and spirit. The traditions leave room for mystery. And then, of course, there are the symbols, the radiant steed, the ascending heavens, the dialogues between prophets. Could these be metaphors for deeper truths? Or are they exactly what they are described to be? Glimpses into realities far beyond our own. The location of Al-Aqsa Mosque itself has become a point of reflection. Though the physical mosque we see today was constructed decades after the Prophet's time, the sanctity of the site predates Islam, echoing with centuries of monotheistic tradition. The very idea that the Prophet's journey passed through Jerusalem ties Islam to the heart of Abrahamic history, a thread linking 3 faiths through one sacred geography. But perhaps one of the most mysterious aspects of the mirage is what remains unsaid. What truly lies beyond the lay tree? What was seen there? That cannot be described. The prophet himself spoke little of that highest encounter, only that it was beyond words, beyond understanding. Was it a vision of the divine, a union of soul and creator, or something for which no language exists? We are left with images, fragments, silences. What does it mean for a human being to ascend through the heavens? What does it mean for space and time to dissolve under the weight of sacred experience? And perhaps most importantly, what is the message for those who remain here on Earth, trying to understand a journey that moved beyond the stars? The Israel Mirage is not just a mystery of the past. It is a mirror reflecting the possibility of closeness to the divine, a reminder that even from the dust of the earth, the sky is never too far. And as the night deepens, As the faithful turn toward the heavens in prayer, one question continues to echo softly and eternally. What else lies beyond the veil, waiting to be revealed? The preservation of the Quran. As the night journey ends, its luminous path arcs between earth and heaven. We return to something grounded, yet no less mysterious. A text, a revelation, words spoken in the stillness of night and the tumult of history. Words recited, memorized, preserved, not across years, but across centuries, and not by a single hand or voice, but by millions. This is the Quran, not merely a book, but a phenomenon. From the calligraphy-laced walls of Cairo's a laser mosque to the quiet recitations echoing at dawn in remote mountain villages, the Quran is ever present. Its sound, rhythm, and meaning form the heartbeat of Islamic life. But beyond its influence lies a question that has intrigued believers, historians, and scholars alike. How has the Quran remained unchanged since the 7th century? How has it endured letter for letter, word for word, through revolutions, empires, conquests, and time? The Quran, according to Islamic belief, was revealed over a span of 23 years to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel, beginning in the year 610 AD. It was recited orally, memorized, and transmitted by his companions. The Prophet himself was unlettered. Yet the Quran was filled with linguistic complexity and depth, rich in metaphor, law, history, and poetry. But how does a recited text survive intact through generations without alteration? In the early years, many companions of the Prophet memorized the entire Quran, becoming human guardians of the text. Oral preservation was not a casual practice, but a structured tradition. Verses were repeated daily, taught word for word with precise pronunciation and rhythm. This oral transmission was considered not only a way to preserve the text, but the only acceptable method to truly embody its sound and meaning. To this day, children across the Islamic world learn to recite it from memory, just as it was first passed down. Yet, memory alone is not the whole story. Fragments of the Quran were also written during the Prophet's lifetime on parchment, leather, bone, and palm leaves. After his death in 632 AD, concerns grew as some of the Hufas were martyred in battle. The Caliph Abu Bakr, urged by Umar Khattab, ordered the compilation of these verses into a single manuscript. This monumental task was given to Zintabit, the Prophet's former scribe. He cross-verified the verses with memorized recitations and written fragments to ensure perfect accuracy. That manuscript, known as the Mushaf, was preserved and guarded. Later, during the Caliphate of Amanafan, as Islam spread rapidly across new regions and dialects began to affect pronunciation, Yemen commissioned several standardized copies of the Quran and sent them to key cities: Mecca, Medina, Kufa, Basra, Damascus. He also ordered all unofficial versions to be removed to prevent confusion. This act, though administrative in nature, would have long-lasting effects. It cemented the unity of the Quran in a single universally accepted form, and remarkably, that form endures to this day. Every Quran recited or printed in the Arabic language matches this Ammanic text. Whether read in Jakarta, Istanbul, Lagos, or London, the words remain the same. Not a word altered, not a verse missing. Muslims believe this is a fulfillment of the divine promise preserved in the Quran itself. Indeed, it is we who sent down the reminder, and indeed, we will be its guardian. But even outside of theology, the preservation of the Quran is something few deny. Non-Muslim historians and textual scholars have studied early Quranic manuscripts with fascination. Among the most significant discoveries is the Birmingham manuscript housed in the University of Birmingham, carbon dated to between 568 and 645 AD, placing it potentially within the Prophet's own lifetime. The text on its pages matches exactly with today's Quran. Likewise, the top copy manuscript in Istanbul, the Samarkand Codex, and the Sanam manuscript in Yemen all reflect the same core text with only minor orthographic differences. Variations in spelling or script style, not in content. How is it that a text transmitted primarily through the human voice could remain so exact? One answer lies in the unique system of recitation known as Tajt. The rules of Taji govern pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and articulation, preserving not just the meaning of the Quran, but its sound. It is not enough to read the words. One must recite them as they were heard. There are even multiple canonical modes of recitation known as the Qira'at, each tracing its chain of transmission back to the Prophet himself, preserved in detail and verified generation after generation. And so the Quran lives not only in books, but in breath, in voice, in memory. Of course, skeptics ask questions. Was every early manuscript destroyed? How do we know oral transmission didn't introduce changes over time? These are fair academic inquiries. Yet the evidence, even outside of religious tradition, suggests extraordinary consistency. In a world where most ancient texts exist only in fragmented copies with significant discrepancies, the Quran's preservation stands apart. Is it the result of a uniquely rigorous memorization culture, a remarkable convergence of oral and written traditions, or something more, something that lies beyond human explanation? The preservation of the Quran invites us to reconsider the relationship between memory, language, and sacredness. How could a text so expansive, so complex, be passed down without corruption in a world, without printing presses, without digital backups? And what does it mean that a book from the 7th century still pulses through the hearts of millions, recited word for word in early morning darkness, in whispered devotion, in grand communal prayer? Perhaps the Quran is more than a preserved text. Perhaps it is a living one. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Not just how it survived, but how it continues to speak in every generation with a voice that never fades. The signs of the hour. From the preservation of sacred words spoken and remembered with remarkable precision, we turn now to words that speak not of the past, but of the future. Words that hint at a time when the veil between the world we know and the world that awaits will fall away. A time of upheaval, signs, and final reckonings. Within the Hadith, the recorded sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, there lies a body of tradition, both revered and mysterious. The Alamat al-Sa, the signs of the hour. Across deserts and cities, in the pages of ancient manuscripts, in the hearts of believers, these signs echo like warnings from another time. Some are small and subtle. Others are immense, cosmic, almost apocalyptic, and together they form a vision of the world's final chapter unlike any other. But how do we make sense of these prophecies? And are they unfolding before our eyes? Hadith contains detailed references to events that will precede the Day of Judgment. These signs are traditionally divided into two categories. Minor signs, which are numerous and often gradual, and major signs, which are extraordinary and unmistakable. The minor signs describe a world slowly unraveling from within. Among them are the rise of widespread immorality, the normalization of dishonesty, leaders who betray their trust, buildings that pierce the sky, the proliferation of music and musical instruments, the increase of wealth and inequality, the spread of literacy, yet an absence of understanding. Some of these signs seem vague, poetic. Others feel hauntingly familiar in a modern world of endless skyscrapers, instant communication, and dizzying change. Did the prophet describe trends that would emerge over centuries? Or are these timeless human patterns we're only now noticing more clearly? Then come the major signs, events that, according to tradition, will mark the nearness of the final hour, like thunder before storm. Among the most well-known is the appearance of the Dajjal, a false messiah described as a great deceiver, blind in one eye, able to perform wonders and sway masses. His emergence will shake the world, drawing people toward illusion and temptation. In contrast, the return of Isa Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary, is foretold. He will descend near a white minaret in Damascus, clad in robes with hands resting on the wings of angels. His mission to restore justice, defeat the dill and break the cross. Not as a rejection of Jesus himself, but as a correction of distortions made over time. This moment, powerful, peaceful, and transcendent, forms a bridge between belief systems and ages. Other signs are deeply symbolic and cosmic in scale. The sun rising from the west instead of the east. A beast emerging from the earth speaking to humanity. A smoke covering the sky. 3 major landslides, one in the east, one in the west, and one in the Arabian Peninsula, the fire that will drive people to their final gathering. There is also mention of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog, tribes of immense power sealed behind a barrier built by Du-Alcarnine, a mysterious ancient figure. When they're unleashed, they will swarm across the earth, spreading chaos. Are these literal people, symbolic forces, or something else entirely? Over the centuries, scholars have debated how to understand these signs. Are they metaphors or events to come? Are they to be interpreted literally or understood through the lens of unfolding history? The Hadith do not always offer timelines or specifics. Some traditions describe events in vivid detail, while others are brief and enigmatic, open to many layers of meaning. And yet certain parallels have caused many to pause. In our time, we see nations collapsing from within, wealth accumulating in fewer hands, natural disasters growing in frequency and scale, technology advancing faster than moral guidance, and even the idea of global deception, of truth being distorted until the lines blur. Are these simply the cycles of history? Or have we entered an age when the signs are no longer distant? Still, Islamic tradition cautions against obsession. The purpose of the signs, according to scholars, is not to create fear or speculation, but awareness. They are reminders that this world is temporary, that justice will ultimately prevail, and that truth, no matter how buried, will be revealed. It's also important to note that these signs, though dramatic, are not presented as hopeless. The world, even at its most chaotic, remains under divine will. The return of Isa, the unity that follows, the final restoration of peace, all are described as realities that will come before the final judgment. The signs are not just warnings. They are stages in a larger, divinely guided unfolding. Still, the mystery remains. Why were these specific images chosen? What might it mean symbolically for the sun to rise from the west? What is the nature of the beast, the smoke, the sealed tribes? And perhaps most haunting of all, if the signs are true, where are we on the timeline? The Hadith do not give dates. They do not map out a calendar. Instead, they whisper through time, offering glimpses like candlelight flickering against a dark wall. Enough to see the path ahead, but not the whole of it. As the prophet once said, the hour will not come until, followed by signs meant to awaken, not alarm. And so, as we watch the world shift and change, as we read the ancient words and try to place ourselves within them, we're left with a quiet, unsettling question. Are the signs still waiting, or are they already here, unfolding quietly beneath our feet, one by one? As the last of the end-time signs gathers on the horizon, portents of upheaval, cosmic shifts, and the unraveling of the known world, there emerges one final figure cloaked in prophecy and mystery. Neither angel nor prophet, neither king nor myth. He is known simply as Al-Mahdi, the Guided One, a man whose coming, according to Islamic tradition, will mark the beginning of the world's final reckoning and the long-awaited restoration of justice. But who is the Mahdi and where has he gone? Across centuries and cultures, from desert minarets to whispered gatherings in mountain caves, the belief in the Mahdi's return has lived on, not as distant folklore, but as a promise. In both Sunni and Shia traditions, the Mahdi is seen as a divinely guided leader who will rise in a time of global turmoil, a time when the earth is filled with injustice and oppression, and when hope seems nearly extinguished. His name, it is said, will mirror that of the prophet Muhammad. His lineage will trace back to the prophet's family, and his mission will be one not of destruction, but of correction, bringing balance to a fractured world. He will unite the believers. He will establish true justice, and alongside the prophet Isa, Jesus, who will return to earth. They will defeat the forces of falsehood, including the Tao, the great deceiver. But beyond these signs, the details blur. Hadiths about them might vary. Some describe his appearance in Mecca during the pilgrimage season. Others say he will be reluctant to lead, found by the people, and accepted only after much insistence. Some narrations speak of a heavenly voice announcing his arrival. Others mention armies marching from the east carrying black banners in his name. For many, these are not distant predictions. They are signs to be watched for, markers of a world on the edge, a signal that the time of transformation is near. And yet, the Mahdi has never been seen. Or has he? In Shia Islam, particularly within the 12-ver tradition, the mystery takes on a deeper dimension. The Mahdi is not only a future figure, he is also a hidden one. According to Shia belief, the 12th Imam Muhammad al-Hassan al-Mahdi was born in the 9th century AD and went into occultation, hidden by divine will from the eyes of the world. He is not dead, they believe, but living in concealment, waiting for the time when he will re-emerge. This GA, or occultation, has lasted for over 1,000 years. In that time, scholars, mystics, and seekers have searched for signs of his presence, believing that he communicates through subtle channels, through dreams, visions, or the actions of righteous scholars who unknowingly prepare his path. Skeptics, even within the Islamic world, have asked hard questions. How can one man live for so many centuries? How does concealment operate within history and nature? Yet for believers, these questions miss the point. The Mahdi's hiddenness is not about biology. It is about divine mystery. Like the unseen wind or the veiled night, his presence is not always visible, but deeply felt. Some accounts describe moments where individuals, scholars, aesthetics, ordinary people have encountered a stranger whose wisdom and insight seem beyond the earthly. A traveler who appeared, offered guidance, and vanished. Were these men imposters or glimpses of the Mahdi in disguise? In times of chaos, new claimants have arisen. Men who declared themselves to be the Me, often with tragic or violent consequences. History remembers them, but the traditions warn. The true Mahdi will not come seeking power or conquest. He will be recognized not through claims, but through deeds. His justice will be unmistakable, his mission unifying. What kind of world must exist for the Mahdi to emerge? A world, it is said, where corruption has become the norm, where truth is ridiculed and falsehood elevated, where division has broken the fabric of society, where people yearn not for wealth or control, but for peace, fairness, and meaning. A world that has perhaps already begun to look familiar. And still silence. No great appearance. No gathering in Mecca. No divine announcement heard across the world. But then again, perhaps that is the nature of his story. What if the Mahdi's return is not simply an event to be witnessed, but a process already unfolding? What if his coming is not only a prophecy about the future, but an invitation to prepare in the present? The Hadith tell us that he will not rise from palaces or the powerful, but from the ordinary. That his followers will not be armies of conquest, but people of character. Those who resist injustice with dignity, who speak truth with humility, who keep faith alive in a time of great forgetting. And what if even now he walks among the crowds of the world unseen, waiting not for permission to rise, but for the hearts of humanity to be ready? The Mahdi's return remains one of the most profound and enduring mysteries in the Islamic tradition. A figure at the edge of time, a promise whispered through generations. Is he still hidden? Is he already here? Or is the world itself, its choices, its hopes, its turning points, part of the story we've yet to fully understand? In the end, the Mahdi remains a mystery not only of when, but why. A question asked in the silence before the storm. A name carried in the prayers of the forgotten. A light waiting perhaps just beyond the veil of this world. The UIM and Thumbum. As we emerge from the echoes of prophecy and return once more to the ancient world, we find ourselves in the inner sanctum of a forgotten temple. Somewhere in the wilderness of history, here behind the veil of ritual and fire, we encounter two objects mentioned rarely, but with reverence, mysterious, sacred, silent, known simply as the Urim and Thummim. Their names appear like a riddle whispered across time, found in the Hebrew Bible glimpsed in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Samuel. They are associated with the high priest of ancient Israel worn within or behind the breastplate of judgment called the hosen, a sacred ornament set with 12 precious stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And behind that breastplate, held perhaps in a hidden pouch, were the Urim and Thummim. But what were they? Scripture offers few details. The terms are often left untraded. And Thummim, simply rendered as if their mystery defies interpretation. Some say the names derive from roots, meaning lights, and perfections, suggesting clarity, truth, or revelation. Others translate them more symbolically, illumination and completion. But beyond the names, we are left with fragments. According to tradition, the high priest would use the Urim and Thummim to seek divine guidance, especially in matters of grave national importance, whether to go to war, whether to appoint a leader, whether to act or wait. They were not tools of superstition, but instruments of divine consultation. But how did they work? This is where the mystery deepens. Some scholars believe they were physical objects, perhaps stones or lots that were cast like dice to reveal a yes or no answer, much like other ancient Near Eastern divinatory practices. Others suggest they were glowing stones that would illuminate to convey answers. Bright for yes, dim for no. A few sources hint that they didn't operate mechanically at all, but rather as a kind of conduit for divine inspiration. That when worn by a truly righteous priest, the answers came not through motion or light, but through inner certainty. In all these theories, one thing is clear. The Urim and Thummim were not ordinary items. They were sacred instruments tied to purity, consecration, and direct access to divine will. And when the age of prophecy began to fade, so did they. By the time of the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BC, references to the Urim and Thummim disappear. When exiles returned to Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple, the sacred breastplate was restored, but the Urim and Thummim were no longer present. Some Jewish texts, like the Talmud, acknowledge their loss. Others suggest they were hidden, perhaps buried beneath the ruins of the temple or taken into heaven, waiting for a future time when prophecy would return. Were they ever rediscovered? That question remains open. Over the centuries, legends emerge. Some claim that secret sects retained knowledge of their use. Others pointed to cryptic descriptions in ancient manuscripts, suggesting that similar tools of revelation existed in Mesopotamia and Egypt, and that the Aim and Thim were part of a broader tradition now lost. Their absence became part of their power, a sacred silence in the history of divine communication. In more recent centuries, the mystery took on new dimensions. In the 19th century, members of the Latter-day Saint movement claimed that a restored version of the Aim and Thumb was used to translate the Book of Mormon, described as clear stones set in silver bows, used by the prophet Joseph Smith to receive divine revelation. These claims, while debated outside the faith, revived interest in the original biblical mystery, sparking questions about how such instruments might transcend time and tradition. Could the Urim and Thummim be something more than physical tools? Some modern scholars and mystics have proposed esoteric interpretations that they represented dual forces, light and truth, intuition and clarity, that they were not meant to give simple answers, but to guide the seeker into communion with divine wisdom. Others wonder whether they symbolized an ancient method of attunement, a way for the high priest to access spiritual states through sacred ritual, clothing, and place. And still the mystery holds. The Urim and Thumb are never described in full detail. Their shape, their size, their color, all unknown. Their disappearance unmarked, their legacy preserved only in name and myth. Why were they mentioned at all if their purpose would fade so quickly from recorded history? Were they real? Were they metaphor? Were they a form of lost technology, or simply a spiritual concept dressed in the language of sacred objects? And if they once served as a direct link between heaven and earth, might they still exist somewhere waiting? Perhaps in a hidden chamber beneath ancient stone, perhaps in a text not yet unearthed, or perhaps in a realm not measured by space or time at all. The Urim and Thummim remain one of the quietest yet most enduring enigmas of ancient faith, objects at the edge of revelation, instruments of light and truth. And in a world where certainty is elusive, they continue to whisper from the shadows of the past. What if answers were once given, not in voices, but in light? And what if, just once, humanity held in its hands a way to ask the divine and truly hear the reply? The lost 10 tribes of Israel. As the ancient echoes of sacred objects fade, stones of judgment lost to time, we shift our gaze toward a different kind of disappearance. Not an artifact, but of a people. A disappearance so vast, so enduring that it continues to stir questions across continents and centuries. It is the mystery of a vanished multitude, the lost 10 tribes of Israel. The story begins nearly 3,000 years ago in a land once divided. After the death of King Solomon, the United Kingdom of Israel split in two. The southern kingdom of Judah, with Jerusalem as its center, and the northern kingdom of Israel made up of 10 tribes: Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, and Manasseh. These were tribes descended from the 12 sons of Jacob, each with its territory, identity, and lineage. Then came the fall. In 722 BC, the powerful Assyrian Empire swept down upon the northern kingdom. Samaria fell, cities burned, populations were taken, displaced, deported, scattered. The Assyrians, known for their brutal policies of forced resettlement, removed tens of thousands of Israelites from their homeland and resettled them in distant lands across their empire, from the banks of the Tigris to the mountains of Media. And then silence. The biblical narrative shifts. The prophets speak of their absence, of longing, of future restoration. But the historical record grows quiet. The 10 tribes, once a vibrant part of the ancient Israelite nation, seem to vanish from the pages of history. No great return is recorded. No definitive trace remains. Where do they go? It is one of the oldest and most enduring enigmas in religious and historical scholarship. Over the centuries, countless theories have emerged, some grounded in anthropology, others in faith, myth, and longing. Each suggests a possibility. Each opens a door. Some scholars believe the exiled Israelites were absorbed into local populations, their identity gradually fading into the cultures of Mesopotamia and Persia. Over generations, names changed, languages shifted, memory blurred. In this view, the tribes were not so much lost as forgotten, dissolved into history's currents like ink in water. But others argue that they survived, hidden, waiting, or even unknowingly preserving parts of their heritage in distant lands. From Ethiopia to Kashmir, from Japan to the American Southwest, people groups have at times claimed descent from the lost tribes or been identified as possible descendants by outside observers. The Beta Israel of Ethiopia, long practicing a form of ancient Judaism, were recognized in modern times by the State of Israel as a remnant of the tribe of Dan. Their customs, prayers, and isolation sparked centuries of curiosity before they were brought to Israel in daring airlifts during the 1980s and 1990s. In the highlands of Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Pashtun tribes, particularly among the Yusuf Sai or sons of Joseph, have long maintained oral traditions linking them to the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Their names, customs, and even ancient legal codes have been compared to biblical patterns. In northeastern India, the Neman, children of Manasseh, claimed descent from the same tribe. Their ancestors, they say, wandered across Asia after the exile, preserving fragments of Israelite memory before eventually settling along the India-Myanmar border. In recent decades, genetic studies, rabbinical inquiries, and personal testimonies have brought some of them to modern Israel. Then there are more speculative theories. Medieval European legends once claimed that the 10 tribes lived behind a mystical river called the Sambishan, which according to lore raged 6 days a week, but rested on the Sabbath, making it impossible for observant Jews to cross. Others believe the tribes lived in a hidden kingdom, cut off from the rest of the world by divine design until a time of redemption. In Japan, cultural similarities and ancient myths have led some researchers to draw tenuous connections between early Japanese religious practices and Israelite rites. Though these claims remain controversial and highly debated, some Native American tribes, particularly during early European colonization, were theorized by missionaries to be descended from the lost tribes based on observed customs and physical similarities. While these theories have largely been dismissed by modern anthropology, they highlight the enduring reach of the mystery and the desire to bridge the gap between past and present. What is it about the lost tribes that continues to fascinate? Perhaps it is the sense of incompletion, the idea that a part of something sacred has been scattered but not erased, that somewhere across the deserts or mountains or jungles, the remnants of an ancient covenant still walk, waiting to be called back. In the prophetic books, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, there are visions of return, of the tribes reuniting, of a final gathering, not only of Judah, but of all of Israel. These are not only theological hopes. They are rooted in the narrative of restoration, a cycle of loss, exile, and homecoming. And yet, we still do not know. Were the 10 tribes truly lost or simply renamed? Were they scattered beyond recognition or preserved in ways we've yet to understand? Could fragments of their memory lie in forgotten manuscripts, buried cities, or unbroken family traditions that whisper quietly through generations? Or is their story not just about people, but about identity, about how faith and heritage endure even when history loses track? The lost tribes remain an open question, a puzzle without edges, not erased but hidden, not myth but mystery, and somewhere perhaps the answer still waits. In a song, a surname, a prayer, in an unfamiliar tongue, waiting to be recognized, waiting to return. The mystery of Mount Sinai, from the forgotten past of the 10 tribes, scattered across history like fragments of a broken mirror. We now turn to a mountain, a place of fire and cloud, a summit wrapped in thunder and silence. It is one of the most sacred and mysterious locations in the religious memory of humanity. Mount Sinai. It is said that here in the wilderness, the heavens touch the earth that atop this mountain cloaked in smoke and trembling with divine presence. Moses received the 10 commandments etched in stone by the very hand of God. The mountain, according to Scripture, was so holy that even touching its base was forbidden. The people below heard the voice like rolling thunder, saw lightning pierce the sky, and trembled as Moses climbed alone into the unknown. But more than 3,000 years later, one question still lingers. Where's Mount Sinai? The traditional answer points to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, where a towering peak, known as Jebel Musa, the mountain of Moses, rises from the desert. At its base lies St. Catherine's Monastery, a fortress of stone built in the 6th century AD, still inhabited by Eastern Orthodox monks. Pilgrims have walked these paths for centuries, ascending before dawn to catch the sunrise over the peaks, retracing steps believed to echo Moses' own. And yet, there is no archaeological evidence linking Jebel Musa directly to the biblical events of Exodus. No tablets, no altars, no trace of the vast encampments described in Scripture. The mountain's identification with Sinai comes from tradition. Early Christian pilgrims, local Bedouins, and imperial patrons who anchored faith in this geography. But what if the true Mount Sinai lies elsewhere? Over the past century, a growing chorus of scholars, explorers, and independent researchers have questioned the traditional location. Some argue that if the Exodus began in Egypt and moved eastward toward Midian, where Moses first encountered the burning bush, then the mountain might logically be found not in the Sinai Peninsula at all, but across the Gulf of Abba in modern-day Saudi Arabia. Here in a remote and mountainous region known as Jabal Laos stands a peak shrouded in mystery. The summit appears scorched, blackened, as if burned by intense heat. Locals call it the Mountain of Moses, and access is restricted. Some explorers who managed to enter the area have claimed to find intriguing features. Large boulders split down the middle, ancient altars with animal engravings, and the remains of stone circles and campsites. Could this be the true Mount Sinai? The Bible describes the Israelites encamping near the mountain for nearly a year. Photographs and satellite images are compelling, but inconclusive. Without systematic excavation, the case remains speculative, provocative, but not proven. Other theories place Mount Sinai in locations as far-flung as Petra in Jordan, the Negev Desert, or even parts of northwestern Arabia near ancient Midianite settlements. Each theory draws from scripture, topography, and sometimes even ancient trade routes. But the mountain remains elusive, hidden behind shifting sand, tradition, and time. Could it be that the mountain was never meant to be found? Some religious scholars propose that Sinai's exact location is deliberately obscured, that its holiness was not meant to be tied forever to a single place, but to an event, a moment in history, a covenant beyond geography. In this view, the mountain is remembered not for where it stood, but for what it meant, the giving of divine law, the forging of identity, the trembling awe of contact with the eternal. Others suggest that the mountain's hiddenness is a reflection of deeper mystery, that the voice from the cloud and the flame was never about spectacle, but about transformation, that Sinai exists not just in desert stone, but wherever human beings seek the divine with trembling hands. Still, the question endures. What if the true Mount Sinai is out there, its summit forgotten, its secrets buried beneath centuries of dust? What if we stood in its shadow and not known? What might still lie beneath those blackened rocks, those wind-swept ridges? Could the tablets have been buried or hidden? Could inscriptions remain, waiting to be deciphered? Or has the mountain, like so many sacred things, slipped just beyond reach, visible only to those who still dare to search, not just across maps, but within? The mystery of Mount Sinai is not merely a question of stones and peaks. It is a question of memory, of revelation, of how a people once stood at the edge of the world and heard a voice not their own. And so the mountain waits, whether in Egypt, Arabia, or in the silence between belief and proof. And the world still wondering asks, where did the sky once touch the earth? And who will find the place where God once spoke in fire? The lost tabernacle, from the smoldering summit of Sinai, where the voice of the divine is said to have echoed through fire and cloud. We follow the footsteps of a people into the wilderness. They did not carry stone and gold merely as treasures, but as memory, covenant, presence. And at the center of it all was a structure unlike any other, portable, sacred, and shrouded in layered curtains and ritual. This was the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the dwelling place of God on earth. It was more than a tent, more than a mobile sanctuary. According to the book of Exodus, its design was given to Moses on Mount Sinai in exquisite detail. Every measurement, every material dictated by divine instruction, acacia wood, gold overlays, embroidered linen in blue and scarlet thread. It housed the Ark of the Covenant, the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table for the bread of presence. And yet today, it is gone. No one knows where the tabernacle went. No remnant survives, no ruins, no foundation. For something so meticulously constructed, so central to the faith and identity of early Israel, its disappearance is stunning. The silence in the archaeological record is profound. And so, like the ark it once sheltered, the tabernacle becomes not only a relic of Scripture, but a mystery of history. What happened to it? For centuries, The tabernacle served as the spiritual heart of the Israelites. It moved with them through the wilderness. It stood at the center of their encampments as they crossed the desert and fought for the promised land. It was established at Shiloh in the hill country of Ephraim and remained there for over 3 centuries, according to the book of Joshua and later accounts in Judges and Samuel. But then something shifted. During the time of the prophet Samuel, the ark was taken into battle against the Philistines and captured. Though eventually returned, it was no longer housed in the tabernacle. Meanwhile, Shiloh was destroyed, likely by the Philistines as well. The Bible does not describe the tabernacle's fate in detail after this event. It simply fades from a narrative, like a curtain quietly drawn shut. Later texts mention that the tabernacle or elements of it were moved to Nob and then to Gibeon. Priests continued to serve. Sacrifices continued to be made, but the centrality of the tabernacle had diminished. By the time Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem, nearly 500 years after the Exodus, the tabernacle was no longer needed. Its role had passed, but what became of its materials, its sacred architecture? Could the golden clasp, the bronze bases, the fine woven veils have been dismantled, reused, hidden? Were its holy components integrated into the temple, as some rabbis have speculated, or stored in the secret beneath Jerusalem's foundations? No definitive answer has ever been found. Over the centuries, a number of theories have emerged, some grounded in archaeology, others in legend. Some believe the remains of the tabernacle lie buried beneath ancient Shiloh, where excavations have uncovered evidence of ritual worship dating back to the correct period. Large flat platforms have been found, possibly the base of a sacred structure. Pottery shards match the time frame, but no definitive proof has emerged. No bales, no coverings, no inscriptions. Others suggest the tabernacle was taken to Jerusalem after David moved the ark there, awaiting the construction of the temple. Yet there is no trace of it in the accounts of Solomon's dedication. It vanishes beneath the grandeur of stone and cedar. Still others point to Ethiopia. Some traditions, particularly within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, claim that both the ark and its dwelling place were brought south by descendants of the Israelite priesthood through Egypt and up the Nile. Could the tabernacle, or a version of it, have been reconstructed in Axum? Pilgrims in Ethiopia still speak of sacred chambers none may enter. Monks guard what they claim is the ark housed in a chapel. If true, could elements of the tabernacle have survived alongside it? And then there are more symbolic theories. Some scholars believe that the tabernacle was never meant to be a permanent structure. Its disappearance was part of a larger transition from the nomadic spirituality of the desert to the centralized worship of the temple. In this view, the tabernacle's loss is not a historical problem, but a theological evolution, a fading tent giving way to stone and permanence. But still there is an unease. How could something so holy, so central to Israelite worship, crafted to divine specification, simply vanish? If the ark was hidden, protected from invading empires, would the same not be done for the tabernacle? And if so, where could it be? Folded and buried, sealed in a chamber beneath ancient Jerusalem, or hidden in one of the many caves dotting the Judean hills? Could it lie beneath centuries of ruins waiting to be rediscovered? Or was it dismantled, not in secrecy, but in ceremony? Its parts scattered, its purpose fulfilled, like the fading of a sacred era. Today, nothing like the tabernacle exists. No surviving fragments, no certain replicas, only descriptions in the Torah, painstaking and precise, only echoes in stone and in memory. And so the question remains, haunting and unresolved. What became of the tent that once held the presence of the divine? Is it lost forever, scattered to dust, or waiting still, hidden beyond sight, a symbol of a time when heaven once dwelled among fabric and fire? The Shem here. As the last embroidered veils of the tabernacle fall away into memory, we shift now from the visible to the hidden, from sacred architecture to sacred utterance. Not a place, but a name not spoken aloud, yet said to hold the very essence of divine power. a name whispered in the shadows of ancient texts, encoded in scripture, sought by mystics across centuries. It is called the Shem Hamphors, the explicit name. In Jewish mystical tradition, is the most sacred formulation of the divine name, a 72-letter name of God drawn not from imagination, but from the Hebrew Bible itself. Unlike the 4-letter tetragrammaton, which is known and revered but never pronounced, the Shem Hopes is said to be hidden, layered beneath the surface of sacred verses, waiting to be revealed only to the initiated. But what is this name really? Where does it come from? And why has it remained so deeply shrouded in secrecy? The roots of the Shem Hamarash trace back to the book of Exodus in chapter 14, ES 19-21. As the Israelites stand trapped between the sea and Pharaoh's army, a miracle unfolds. These 3 verses, each containing exactly 72 Hebrew letters, describe the moment the Red Sea parts, where divine intervention pierces the natural world. According to Kabbalistic tradition, when these verses are arranged in a particular manner, forward, then backward, then forward again, and their letters aligned, they form 72 triplets, 72 combinations of 3 Hebrew letters, each said to represent one of the 72 aspects of divine action, power, and presence. Together, they constitute the Shem Hammers, a name too holy for speech, too potent for casual knowledge. Mystics believe that these names were not arbitrary syllables, but keys, each unlocking a specific attribute of the divine. One triplet might govern healing, another protection, another understanding. To know the full 72-let name was to access a hidden map of the cosmos, a lattice work of divine will, woven into the fabric of creation. But only a few, it is said, were ever entrusted with it. Ancient rabbinic traditions suggest that the high priest of the temple in Jerusalem knew the explicit name. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, he would utter it in the innermost chamber of the temple, the Holy of Holies. When he did, legend holds the name would rise into the air like smoke, radiating through all levels of being, and those who heard it, if their hearts were not pure, would fall silent forever. Later traditions hint that knowledge of the name was lost after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. Others claim it was not lost, but hidden and coded in texts passed in whispers from teacher to student, written in the margins of forbidden books, protected by layers of metaphor and symbol. Medieval Kabbalists such as Isaac Lura and Moses de Leon would explore the structure and significance of the name, linking the 72 triplets to angelic hierarchies, astrological forces, and the inner architecture of the soul. In their writings, the Shem Hamarash is not a static name. It is a dynamic formula alive with spiritual resonance. But where does the mystery begin and where does it end? In later centuries, European occultists, particularly within Hermetic and esoteric Christian circles, discovered the concept of the 72 names and integrated it into magical grimmers. The names became tools of invocation engraved in amulets, whispered in rituals. Some believed the names could summon angels. Others warned they could tear open the veil between worlds. But traditional Jewish mysticism always maintained a different posture. The name was not a trick, not a spell. It was sacred. To approach, it was to stand on holy ground. So how do we separate fact from speculation? Modern scholars recognize that the method of deriving the 72 triplets from Exodus 14 is real, a legitimate linguistic and numerological technique grounded in the Hebrew text. The arrangement is methodical, not arbitrary. But what meaning is truly embedded in the result? Some argue that the triplets are poetic. Others see in them a numerical code. Still others, mystics and mathematicians alike, believe they form the structure of a spiritual language meant to reflect the unfolding of divine will across time. And yet, no one claims to know exactly how the name works or what it means to use it. Could it be that the Shem Hamfash is not a name at all, but a mirror, a map of how the human soul approaches the unknowable, a riddle meant to humble, not to solve? Or perhaps the true name is not in letters, but in silence, in the space between the words of Exodus, in the moment the sea parted, not because of syllables spoken, but because of hearts aligned. Today, the 72 names of God are still recited in mystical meditations, studied in secret, feared in some circles, venerated in others. The letters remain, the triplets endure. But the full meaning of the Shem Haperish lies just beyond reach, inviting reflection, not resolution. And so we are left with the question, is the explicit name hidden in plain sight? Is it a code waiting to be broken? Or is it a door that opens not with knowledge, but with reverence? Perhaps the Shem Hamish is not a key to power, but to presence, a whisper of the infinite stitched into the very language of the divine, the sunken city of Dvarka. From the veiled power of sacred syllables to the shimmering edge of the Arabian Sea, our journey moves now from text to terrain, from a hidden name to a city whispered about in Scripture, long thought to be legend. A city of golden towers and vast palaces said to have been built by divine hands and swallowed by the sea. This is Dwara, the fabled city of Krishna. According to ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Haravsa, Dwara was no ordinary settlement. It was a city built for a god planned, constructed and governed by Lord Krishna, the eighth avatar of Vishnu. Located on the western coast of India, it is described as a marvel of architecture and spirituality with 900,000 grand palaces, golden walls, emerald floors, and expansive gardens. The city floated on the edge of the earth, a jewel at the ocean's fingertips. But then as the texts recount, something extraordinary happened. After Krishna departed from the world, Dvarka was engulfed by the sea. Was it divine retribution, a fulfillment of cosmic prophecy, or the poetic conclusion to an epic narrative? For centuries, the story of Dvarka was seen by many as just that, a story, a myth embedded in sacred literature, a metaphor for the impermanence of glory. But then in the late 20th century, the ocean began to whisper secrets of its own. In 1983, marine archaeologists with the National Institute of Oceanography began exploratory dives near the modern-day city of Dwara, located in the state of Gujarat. What they found beneath the waves was both unexpected and tantalizing. Just off the coast, under layers of sand and sediment, divers discovered what appeared to be man-made structures. Stone walls, grids resembling streets, and remnants of buildings arranged with an order that suggested urban planning. Further investigations revealed anchors, pottery, shards, and stone platforms. Sonar scans mapped rectangular formations and linear alignments. Could this be the legendary city? Carbon dating of artifacts suggested some elements were at least 300 to 3,500 years old, placing them roughly within the time frame many scholars associate with Krishna's era, traditionally dated to the end of the Dvapar Yuga, around 3,100 BC. Other material dated closer to 1,500 BC, raising questions about layers of habitation and the evolution of coastal societies in ancient India. Was this the Dvarka of the texts, or another city lost to the sea? The Indian government declared the findings evidence of an ancient submerged city, and the announcement reignited debate across archaeological and religious circles alike. Pilgrims, historians, skeptics, and spiritual seekers descended on the site or turned their attention to its growing file of underwater footage and research papers. And yet, as with many ancient mysteries, definitive answers remain elusive. Critics of the discovery argue that while the underwater structures are real, they may not be as old as claimed. Some suggest the formations are natural, shaped by erosion and marine geology. Others point out that sea level rise over the past several millennia, while significant, may not fully explain the sudden submergence of a massive metropolis. The question of Dvarka's disappearance is not merely scientific. It's philosophical, mythological, cultural. The Mahabharata describes Krishna's departure from the world as the end of an age, a moment of transition between cosmic cycles. With his passing, the divine balance was disrupted, and Dvarka, his city, his seat of power was no longer meant to remain. The ocean rose to reclaim what belonged to the gods. Is this poetic metaphor a symbol of detachment in the transiencies of even the greatest civilizations? Or does the ancient memory hide fragments of historical truth, of tectonic shifts, rising seas, and forgotten cities washed away by time? Around the world, there are stories of cities consumed by water. Atlantis, Heraclean, Pavloitri, Port Royal. In each, the sea holds secrets, testaments to humanity's fragile place on the planet's shifting surface. Could Dvarka be India's echo of this timeless theme? Other researchers turn to satellite imagery and geological surveys. Some suggest that ancient rivers, now dry, once flowed into the Arabian Sea in this region, supporting the idea of a thriving port city that predated many recorded civilizations. Others point to potential connections between Dvarka and the Indus Valley civilization, suggesting a continuity or overlap in urban planning and maritime trade. And still beneath the waves, the stones remain covered in coral, worn by current, silent. What is certain is that something lies beneath the surface, something man-made, ancient, and complex. Whether it is the Dwara of Krishna or a city lost to history and later folded into myth, it continues to invite wonder and investigation. Perhaps the real mystery is not just the physical location, but the way memory clings to myth. How stories endure across millennia only to be echoed by archaeology, hinting that our ancestors remembered more than we often assume. Could the disappearance of Dvarka be a story of rising seas and shifting shores? Or is it something more? An intentional concealment, a divine act, a veiled transition from mortal domain to sacred remembrance? As the waters move gently over submerged stone, the question remains, did a god truly build a city on the edge of the world? And if so, what else might still sleep beneath the sea, waiting to be found, the iron pillar of Delhi from the sunken stones? Of Dvarka, where seawater conceals a vanished past, we rise once again to solid ground, yet find ourselves facing another enigma that defies time itself. Here, standing in plain sight under the open sky of Delhi, is a monument to impermanence that seems permanent. A pillar that has defied not only centuries, but the very laws of nature. This is the Iron Pillar of Delhi, sometimes called the Ashoka Pillar, though its origins may stretch even further than the Mauryan emperor's storied reign. Nearly 7 m tall and weighing over 6 tons, this ancient column of iron has stood for more than 1,600 years in the courtyard of the Kutba complex, exposed to monsoon rains, blistering summers, and the full passage of time. And yet, it has not rusted, not in the way one might expect. While the surface bears the dark patina of age, the iron remains strong, largely untouched by corrosion. There is no flaking, no deep rust, no structural degradation. In a world where modern steel can crumble under less, the pillar's endurance invites a question that bridges metallurgy, history, and mystery. Who made it? How? And what secret does it hold? Inscribed in Sanskrit near the base is a dedication to a king named Chandra, believed by most scholars to be Chandragupta II, who ruled during the Gupta Empire in the 4th or early 5th century AD. The inscription praises his valor and divine support, but says nothing about the technology used to forge the pillar. No blueprint, no metallurgical formula, just a monument to power, grace, and glory. The material itself is extraordinary. Modern analysis has revealed that the pillar is composed of about 9,972% wrought iron. Remarkably pure, especially for an era with no blast furnaces or industrial processing. The iron was forged not in a single cast, but through repeated hammering and welding of iron chunks at high temperatures. It is estimated that the iron workers may have used hundreds of individual pieces to create the seamless column. But even more baffling is its resistance to corrosion. Scientists who have studied The pillar found that its surface contains a thin protective film of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, commonly called misoate, a compound that formed naturally over time and prevents further rust from developing. This film, barely 1/12 of a millimeter thick, is believed to be the result of a unique combination of impurities in the iron, high phosphorus content, and the dry climate of Delhi. Could this have happened by chance? Or did the ancient smiths who produce similar, though less enduring iron objects across India understand something modern science only recently rediscovered? Some historians argue that the corrosion resistance is accidental, a fortunate convergence of high phosphorus iron and favorable weather. Others believe the metal workers of the Gupta era had an empirical, if not scientific, knowledge of materials, that through centuries of trial and refinement, they developed methods that were eventually lost with time. But more speculative theories stretch further. Some claim that the pillar's origins predate even Chandragupta II, that it was transported from central India or even from a now-lost temple site. Its original purpose tied not only to royal commemoration, but to spiritual energy. Legends abound in local lore that the pillar was forged by gods, that it was once part of a celestial device, or that its position aligns with invisible currents of earth energy. One persistent folk belief says that if you can encircle the pillar with your arms while standing with your back to it, your wish will be granted. A tradition so popular that iron railings were eventually installed to prevent wear. Another tale tells of a spike once at the top, now missing, that connected heaven and earth, a symbolic axis mundi joining the material and spiritual worlds. These stories, while poetic, often distract from the deeper mystery that the pillar stands as both an artifact and an unanswered question. At a time when corrosion-resistant alloys are the product of laboratory precision, how did ancient artisans achieve such results with basic tools and furnaces? Even now, efforts to replicate the anti-rust properties of the pillar using ancient methods have proven difficult. The exact ratios, forging temperatures, and cooling times remain unclear. Was it a singular achievement, a lost technique? Or does it hint at a wider, now erased body of knowledge in early Indian metallurgy? What makes the iron pillar more than a metallurgical marvel? Is it its silence? It bears no boast of how it was made, no inscription on chemistry, no carved diagram of furnaces, only praise for a forgotten king in the slow, steady refusal to decay. Could it be that this pillar was not just a monument, but a message, a quiet challenge across time, asking not only what we remember, but how much we've forgotten? In a world where rust devours bridges and skyscrapers, the iron pillar remains calm, upright, enduring. And as we stand before it, the question remains, was this survival a stroke of fortune, or a glimpse into a knowledge we no longer possess? And if so, what other secrets lie sleeping in the metals of our past? The lost books of Zoroaster? As the soft glow of temple lamps fades, and the mystery of the Buddha's lost relic disappears once more into golden silence, we turn now toward the ancient fires of Persia, where flame was not just light, but symbol, sacred, eternal, where truth was a path carved between the forces of darkness and light, and where knowledge, divine knowledge, was once said to be contained in hundreds of holy texts, most of which are now lost. These are the lost books of Zoroaster, a vanished library of the world's oldest known monotheistic religion and one of the great literary disappearances of antiquity. Zoroastrianism, the faith founded by the prophet Zarathustra, known to the Greeks as Zoroaster, arose in the Iranian plateau sometime before the 6th century BC. Though many scholars believe its roots go far deeper, possibly as early as 1200 BC. It would go on to influence Judaism, Christianity, and Islam with its core ideas, a single creator God, Ahura Mazda, the eternal battle between good and evil, the concept of free will, judgment after death, and the eventual triumph of light. But if Zoroastrianism helped shape the philosophical foundations of the modern world, what happened to its own foundational texts? According to Zoroastrian tradition, the teachings of Zarathustra were once compiled in 21 nazas, books that encompassed hymns, liturgy, law, medicine, astronomy, cosmology, ethics, and esoteric knowledge. These are not brief scrolls or chants. They were comprehensive volumes said to contain divine insight revealed directly to the prophet. Today, only fragments survive. The existing Zoroastrian scriptures, what we now call the Avesta, are a shadow of this once grand corpus. The preserved texts include the Gothas, the hymns believed to be Zarathustra's own words, the Yasna liturgical rites, the Visparad, Vindadad, and a handful of other pieces. But where are the rest? The Dangard, a 9th century Zoroastrian text, offers a clue. It tells us that the full Avesta was once written on 12,000 cowhides, an unimaginable scale, inscribed in gold ink and stored in the royal archives of Persepolis during the Achaemenid Empire. If this account holds truth, then what was lost was not merely sacred, but immense. The destruction came in waves. When Alexander the Great invaded Persia in 330 BC and burned Persepolis, Zoroastrians believed the Avesta was one of the casualties. Scattered, looted, and burned. Later during the Seleucid and Parthian eras, oral traditions kept part alive, but many texts were lost deliberately or through neglect. When the Sasanian Empire 246-51 AD revived Zoroastrianism as a state religion, efforts were made to reconstruct the canon. Yet much was already beyond recovery. Then came the Arab conquest of Persia in the 7th century AD. Zoroastrian temples were destroyed or repurposed, and remaining texts fell victim to political and religious upheaval. By the time later, Zoroastrian communities like the Parsis of India re-established themselves. Only a fraction of the original writings remained. But what was lost? Among the most intriguing missing texts are the more mystical and philosophical masks. Some scholars believe they may have contained teachings on cosmology, cycles of time, the nature of divine beings, and advanced ethical doctrines. Others point to possible medical and astronomical knowledge preserved in encoded language or allegory. Could these books have rivaled other ancient texts like the Vedas, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the Dead Sea Scrolls in scope and insight? Even the remaining texts hint at what's missing. The Yasna, for example, refers to rituals no longer practiced. The Vindadad outlines laws and myths that seem to respond to older, now absent writings. The gaps are visible, like missing verses in a familiar song. In the quiet libraries of Yaz and Navsari, where Zoroastrian texts are still copied and preserved by hand, there are whispers of other scrolls, untranslated, locked in old Avestan or Pahlavi, and barely understood. Some scholars believe that portions of the lost masks might survive within the commentaries, waiting to be identified, pieced together, and reinterpreted. And then there are more speculative claims. Over the centuries, rumors have surfaced of hidden Zoroastrian texts buried beneath temples, walled inside remote fire sanctuaries, or even protected by underground brotherhoods of priests. In 19th century British colonial records, travelers in Persia reported hearing of secret manuscripts held by families who feared persecution if their existence became known. Could a full or partial copy of one of the lost masks still exist, forgotten in a sealed chest, hidden in a mountain cave, or collecting dust in a private archive, mislabeled and unread? It would not be the first time such a rediscovery occurred. The Dead Sea Scrolls emerged from the Judean desert after millennia. The Nag Hammadi library was uncovered in Egypt by a farmer digging for fertilizer. The Famine Temple crypt in China yielded Buddhist relics sealed in stone for 1,000 years. Why not the lost books of Zoroaster? But perhaps the deeper mystery lies not in what was written, but in what was meant to be remembered. For Zoroastrianism has always emphasized Asha, truth, order, cosmic harmony. The sacred fire burns not to illuminate the past, but to guide the living. Might the missing books then be less about content and more about a forgotten way of seeing the world? Still, the question persists. What secrets were burned in the fires of Pepololis? What hymns, philosophies, and forgotten sciences vanished when empires crumbled and libraries turned to ash? Were these texts mere legends? Or are fragments still waiting somewhere to be found? And if so, when they are uncovered, what might they reveal about a time when wisdom was not just written, but lived in the flame? The Oracle Bones of China. From the smoldering ruins of lost Persian texts, where fire was both sacred and consuming, we travel east across mountains and steppes to the great river valleys of ancient China. Here in the dusty plains near Anyang, beneath layers of soil and forgotten tombs, archaeologists uncovered not scrolls or temples, but fragments of bone burned, cracked, inscribed with characters that whisper across millennia. They are known as the Oracle Bones, and they may represent one of the oldest written conversations between humans and the divine. At first glance, they seem humble pieces of turtle plast or ox scapula yellowed, with age bearing delicate lines of early Chinese script. But look closer and a stranger truth emerges. These bones were once the medium through which the rulers of the Shang dynasty, who ruled parts of the Yellow River Valley from around 1600 to 1046 BC, sought the guidance of the spirits. The process was ritualistic, almost surgical. The bones were cleaned, prepared, and sometimes hollowed out. Questions were carved into them. Formal, careful inquiries etched by scribes in an early form of Chinese writing known as jagan. A royal diver, often under the direction of the king himself, would then apply intense heat to specific points on the reverse side using a heated rod or metal tool. The bone would crack, sometimes audibly, producing fissures whose shapes were believed to reveal answers from the ancestors or from the heavens. The subjects of the questions range from the mundane to the profound. Will it rain on the day of the ritual? Should we send soldiers to the eastern frontier? Will the child in the queen's womb be a boy? Is the king's toothache the result of an ancestor's displeasure? Some bones contain both the question and the answer. Others even record the eventual outcome, creating a rare ancient record of prediction versus reality. But what makes the Oracle Bones more than an anthropological curiosity is the scale and complexity of what they preserve. Tens of thousands have been unearthed at Anyang, near what is believed to have been the last capital of the Shang dynasty. Together, they form not just a record of prophecy, but the earliest known foundation of the Chinese writing system. Characters still recognizable in modern Mandarin today, and yet their rediscovery was almost accidental. In the late 19th century, Chinese scholars began noticing strange dragon bones being sold in apothecaries. These bones, ground into powder, were believed to hold medicinal properties. One scholar, Wang Yurong, realized that the strange scratches on their surface were actually writing unlike anything then known. What followed was a rush to locate the original source, an excavation that would eventually uncover the royal tombs of the Shan kings and thousands of oracle bones buried in pits and sacrificial altars. But as with so many ancient practices, the deeper one looks, the more unsettling the mystery becomes. What precisely were the divers seeing in the cracks? Did the shapes trigger intuitive judgments? Or were they interpreted through a complex lost code? Why did they believe the ancestors could speak through heat and bone? And could this method of communication through flame and fracture have been part of an even older Pan-Eurasian practice now forgotten? Some scholars suggest that the Shang oracle bones reflect not just religious ritual, but early statecraft. That the king's role as chief diver placed him as the intermediary between humanity and the unseen world, not just in a spiritual sense, but in political reality. Every decision of consequence passed through this channel. It was not merely a superstition. It was government. Yet others see something stranger. The precision of the inscriptions, the repetition of certain character forms, and the almost mathematical patterning of some questions have led a few researchers to propose that the bones may have also encoded astronomical data, agricultural cycles, or even cryptic historical events, records of dynastic power struggles disguised as divine dialogue. Even more speculative are the theories that link the oracle bones to wider systems of ancient knowledge. Some propose that the practice of divining through cracks has parallels in Mesopotamian hepatoscopy, where priests read the livers of sacrificed animals, or in Roman augury, where birds and lightning were consulted before battle. Were these parallel inventions or echoes of shared, long-lost method of interpreting the world? The Shang dynasty eventually fell to the Zhou, and over time the use of oracle bones faded. Later dynasties embraced written texts, astrology, and cosmology, but the bones never fully disappeared from cultural memory. Their legacy lived on in script, in ritual, and perhaps in a persistent sense that reality is not always what it seems. The truth might not be read in ink alone, but in the patterns of fire, fracture, and bone. And today, more than 3,000 years later, the mystery continues. Some oracle bones remain untranslated. Others are locked in private collections far from scholarly eyes. Each one is a fragment of a forgotten conversation. Half of a question, half of an answer, with no way to hear the voice that once spoke through heat and crack. Could there be more? Unexcavated caches of bones beneath ancient temples or buried in sacrificial pits. Could we one day find the earliest questions ever asked, not in stone tablets or clay, but in these fragile remnants of burnt bone? And what might those questions reveal about a time when kings knelt beside fire, bone in hand, and listened for the voice of the unseen? Perhaps the oracle bones were never about knowing the future, but about remembering the invisible threads that hold the present together. And if that's true, what else might still lie hidden beneath the dust of ages, waiting to speak again? The whirling dervishes. As the brittle oracle bones of ancient China fall silent once more, bearing their cryptic truths from a vanished world, we shift from the stillness of bone to the motion of the soul, from questions carved in fire to answers sought in movement. In the shadowed halls of Sufi lodges, under candlelight and vaulted stone, another kind of mystery unfolds, one not spoken but danced. This is the enigma of the Sufi whirling dervishes and the sacred spiral they trace toward the divine. Step into a dimly lit chamber in Ka, Turkey. A hush settles over the room as musicians begin to play. Reed flute, frame drum, and timbre weaving a hypnotic melody that feels older than memory. Figures in long white robes and tall felt hats enter in silence. They bow, circle, and finally begin to spin slowly at first, then with growing intensity, arms outstretched, right palm facing the sky, left palm turned to the earth. The fabric of their skirts flares outward, becoming a ring of white light. They spin and spin and spin. But what are they reaching for? Known as the seam ceremony, this whirling ritual is performed by the Mevi order of Sufis, followers of the 13th century Persian mystic and poet Jalal al-Dini. It is not performance, they insist, but prayer, an inward journey through outward motion, a way of silencing the ego to feel, however briefly, the eternal presence of God. Yet for outsiders, the mystery remains. How can such a physical act spinning for 20, 30, even 40 minutes without pause bring about spiritual awakening? Why does this particular form of movement appear again and again in mystical traditions across cultures? And what secrets might lie encoded in the very geometry of the world? The origins of the Sufi whirling tradition are difficult to pin down. Rumi himself is said to have begun spinning spontaneously in a marketplace in Ka, overcome by the rhythms of divine love. According to legend, as he turned, he heard the music of the universe, the planets, the angels, the name of God. For Rumi and his disciples, the spinning was not symbolic. It was transformative, a way of tuning the body to the celestial harmony that underlies all creation. From this moment emerged an entire spiritual discipline. The dervishes trained not only their bodies, but their hearts. Before they whirl, they fast, pray, and study. Each movement in the Sama has meaning. The bow to begin is an acknowledgement of unity. The circling steps represent the journey through spiritual stations. The spin itself becomes an axis of surrender. But science, too, has looked at this practice with fascination. Neurologists have noted that extended whirling can induce altered states of consciousness, disrupting normal brain patterns in stimulating regions linked to emotion, balance, and self-awareness. The dervish, while spinning, may lose ordinary sensory perception, but gain a heightened state of presence. Some compare it to meditation, others to trance, still others to what modern psychology calls flow. But are we simply mapping poetry onto neurons? Some scholars have pointed to possible links between Sufi whirling and older pre-Islamic rituals involving dance and ecstatic movement. In Central Asia, where Sufism took deep root, shamanic traditions included circular motion, rhythmic drumming, and rotational trance. Could the SMA have absorbed and sanctified something much older, an ancient technology of spirit repurposed for a new religious framework? More. Speculative theories go further. They suggest the whirling dervish is not merely a religious figure, but an unwitting expression of cosmic principles. The spiral, after all, is everywhere. Galaxies, hurricanes, nautilus shells, DNA. The act of spinning aligns with the motion of the Earth, the orbit of the stars. Could it be that the dervishes, in their simplicity, are imitating something vast, something universal? And then there is the question of what they see. Dervishes speak of entering a state beyond thought, where identity dissolves and a presence beyond words fills the space within. Room's poetry reflects this with lines that seem to come from beyond the veil. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Is the sema a key to that open door? A pattern that leads to presence? Yet for all its beauty and apparent meaning, the Sufi whirling ritual has not always been accepted. At times it was banned. The Mevi order was dissolved under Turkey's secular reforms in the early 20th century, and many saw the sema as an archaic relic. Even within Islamic orthodoxy, some scholars have viewed it with suspicion. Too mystical, too sensual, too far from the law. But it survived quietly, then publicly. Today, Sufi whirling is practiced around the world, sometimes as sacred rite, sometimes as cultural performance, but the mystery remains intact. Why does the human heart respond to spinning in this way? What do the dervishes touch when they turn? And more intriguingly, could the body through movement alone reach places the mind cannot? The SMA ceremony continues to invite awe, not just because it is beautiful, but because it points to something beyond itself, something ancient, wordless, and yet universal, a turning that never ends. And perhaps if we look closely enough, we too might begin to sense what Rumi once heard in that marketplace long ago. Not a sound, but a silence behind the sound. Not motion, but stillness inside the spin. A mystery that waits not to be solved, but to be entered. The golden plates of the Book of Mormon. As the dervish slows his turning and the Sufi chamber falls once more into stillness, our journey now shifts westward across continents, across centuries to a dense grove in upstate New York. The year is 1823. It is early morning. The forest is quiet except for the rustling of leaves and the slow dawn wind through the trees. A teenage boy named Joseph Smith kneels alone on the earth, praying, searching, waiting. And then, so the story goes, the ground opens to mystery. There, buried in a stone box beneath a hill called Cumara, were plates shining. Plates of gold, etched with strange characters bound in rings, heavy, sacred, and sealed. According to Smith, these plates contained a record of ancient prophets who had lived on the American continent long before Columbus. Their language, Reformed Egyptian. Their message, a testament of Jesus Christ. These were the golden plates of the Book of Mormon. Today, they remain among the most controversial and enigmatic artifacts in American religious history. Revered by millions, doubted by many, and seen by only a few, their origin, existence, and disappearance continue to raise questions that blur the lines between faith, history, and myth. What were the golden plates? Where did they come from? And where did they go? According to Joseph Smith's own account, the angel appeared to him and revealed the location of the plates, but he was not permitted to take them right away. Over the course of 4 years, he returned annually to the hill, preparing himself spiritually for the task. At last, in 1827, he was given the plates along with two special objects. Interpreters called the Urim and Thummim, which he claimed helped him translate the ancient script into English. The translation, he said, was accomplished through divine means. In some accounts, he looked into the interpreters like a connoisseur stone. In others, he placed a stone into a hat and dictated the words as they appeared to him. The result was the Book of Mormon, first published in 1830. But almost as quickly as they appeared, the plates vanished. Smith said that after the translation was completed, the angel, Moroni, returned to reclaim them. They were taken back, sealed from view, and no longer accessible. What remains today is the book they are said to have produced, but not the plates themselves. Skeptics argue this is a convenient absence. How can such extraordinary claims be accepted without physical evidence? Yet believers point to the testimony of witnesses. 11 men, known as the 3 witnesses, and the 8 witnesses signed published statements asserting they had seen and in some cases handled the plates. Some claimed they saw them with their own eyes. Others said they were shown in a vision. But even these testimonies are complex. Over time, some of the witnesses left the early church and their relationships with Joseph Smith fractured. And yet, remarkably, most never retracted their statements about the plates. So what were these plates? Were they real physical objects, a vision, a symbolic experience, or was something else entirely? Descriptions vary. Some said the plates were about 6 in wide, 8 in long, and 6 in thick, bound in 3 rings. They were described as being gold in appearance, but not necessarily solid gold, perhaps an alloy. If real, such an object would be extraordinarily heavy. Could Smith have fabricated them? If so, how did he convince others they were real? And what of the translation process, so different from traditional linguistic methods? Then there is the language itself. Reformed Egyptian is unknown to mainstream scholars. No other examples have ever been found. Some suggest this was a script invented by ancient American peoples, later lost. Others argue it was a symbolic term, not meant to correspond to a known historical language. The Book of Mormon contains names, genealogies, and complex narratives involving civilizations such as the Nephite and Lamanites, allegedly descendants of Israelites who fled Jerusalem around 600 BC and traveled to the Americas. Archaeologists and historians have long debated the lack of corroborating evidence for these civilizations. While there are rich and ancient cultures in pre-Columbian America, such as the Maya and Mech, no definitive connection has been made to the peoples described in the Book of Mormon. Critics see this as a major challenge. Believers see it as an open field, evidence still waiting to be uncovered or perhaps misunderstood. More speculative voices have suggested that the golden plates may have never been earthly objects in the ordinary sense, that they were real but not bound by the physical laws we understand, objects of divine origin existing for a time within our world, but not fully of it. Others point to ancient traditions in which sacred knowledge is hidden in golden books or metal scrolls, found, read, and then concealed. Stories of buried records appear in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic apocrypha, as well as in Mesoamerican myth. Could Joseph Smith's account be a modern echo of this much older pattern? Even within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the golden plates are treated with reverent silence. No replicas, no physical relics remain. What endures is the book, the belief, the idea that sacred history may lie just beneath the surface of the world, waiting for someone to uncover it. And so the mystery remains. Were the plates ever truly there, buried under a hill in rural New York? Were they a divine vision given form? Were they real, hidden once more? Or is the real mystery not the plates themselves, but the power they continue to hold across generations, languages, and lands? Perhaps the truth, like the plates, is something we're still translating one word at a time, one question at a time, towards something that still gleams in the dark.